Welcome back to Goofy Harry, the channel where the stories never quite go the way the books did. Today's adventure: what if Master Splinter found baby Harry in the sewers and raised him as a ninja? Before we drop down into the dark, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button and ring the bell, so a brand new story always finds its way to you. Settled in? Good. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The bundle in the dark rain came down on the city like it meant to wash it loose from the earth. Mara Finchley ran with her coat open and her arms full, and the water hit her face in sheets that blurred the street lamps into long gold smears. She did not slow to wipe her eyes. She could not. The thing she carried weighed almost nothing and weighed more than the whole soaked world, and every step she took along the empty avenue she counted as one step further from the men who wanted it. The bundle against her chest made a sound, a thin complaint half swallowed by the storm. She bent her head over it and kept moving. "Hush now," she breathed. "Hush, little one, not far, just a little further." She did not know the city. That had been the point. A junior clerk in the American Magical Registry did not know London either, but she had stood in a back office 3 nights ago and heard 2 senior men talk in low voices about a child across the ocean, a child with a name that had become a word people whispered for hope, and she had heard them talk about that child the way men talk about a coin they intend to spend. Custody, placement, useful. The words had a smoothness she did not trust. So when an owl came from a friend of a friend, a frantic note and a portkey and a basket pushed into her hands at the edge of a wet field, she had not asked the careful questions a careful clerk asks. She had simply held on and turned and gone. The portkey had been meant to set them down somewhere quiet. It had not. Magic done in fear travels crooked. They had landed hard against a brick wall in a part of the city where the buildings leaned and the gutters ran like rivers, and her ankle had folded under her, and that had been an hour ago, and she had been walking on it ever since. Behind her, a sound that was not thunder. She had been taught to recognize that sound. A seam in the air, a pressure that arrived before the noise did, the particular tearing hum of someone arriving who did not want to be announced. She turned her shoulder to it on instinct and put her body between the basket and the dark mouth of the alley, and a flash of light the color of a bruise leapt out of that mouth and struck the wall a handspin from her head. Brick shattered, hot grit stung her cheek. "There," a voice said, conversational, very close, warm with its own cleverness. "I told you she'd run toward the water." Mara did not answer. Answering wasted breath, and breath was the only currency she had left. She lurched off the curb into the flooded street, and the second curse came lower and faster, and it took her in the hip and spun her, and the world tilted into a long, bright ringing. She kept her arms closed. Whatever else failed, her arms did not. The street was tilting because she was falling, and where she fell the storm had carved a fast brown channel along the gutter toward a grate set in the curb, an old iron grate big enough to swallow a wheelbarrow, its bars chewed loose by 60 winters of salt. The basket left her hands. She felt it go and could not stop it. She saw it ride the rushing water, saw the wicker turn once, saw the small pale face inside open its mouth, and then the grate took the basket, and the basket was gone down into the black under the street, where the water roared and fell away into a deeper dark. A man in a long coat reached the curb and stood over her and looked down at the grate with his wand still warm in his hand. He had expected a woman and a child. He had a woman. "Where?" he said. Mara Finchley smiled at him with rain and blood on her teeth because she had won, and he did not yet understand that he had lost, and that was the last good thing she would ever know. 20 feet below the street, the storm was a rumor. It came down to the tunnels as a sound in the pipes and a smell of cold metal, and as water, always as water, threading along the channels in the old brick, rising a finger's width in the troughs, beating on the curved ceilings, and falling in slow strings into the troughs again. The runoff would crest within the hour and fall again before dawn. The one who lived down here knew the rhythm of it the way a sailor knows a tide. In a wide vaulted chamber where an abandoned rail platform had been swept and tended and made into something like a home, an old rat stood very still in the center of a worn mat and watched 4 small green shapes try to be still around him, and fail, and try again. "Again," said Splinter. 4 bodies sank back into the low stance. They were not yet 2 years old in the count of their changing, but the change had made them quick, and it had made their hands clever, and it had not yet taught them patience, which was the only lesson Splinter cared on this night to give. "You are not standing in mud," he told them. "You are not waiting for the bus. You are a stone in a river. The river moves. The stone does not. Where is my stone?" The one with the blue cloth tied at his brow set his shoulders and went quiet and deep, and his small chest rose and fell and slowed. Splinter let his gaze rest on him a moment. Leonardo would always be the one who heard the lesson first. That was a gift, and it was a weight, and both of those things would only grow. "Sensei, my leg's asleep," announced the one in orange in a tone of cheerful betrayal, toppling sideways onto the one in purple, who toppled into the one in red, who did not topple because the one in red had planted himself like he was daring the floor to try something. "Mikey, it's not my fault my leg fell asleep. It's a very boring exercise." "No offense, Sensei, it's a respectful kind of boring." Splinter breathed out through his nose, which was the closest he allowed himself most nights to laughter. "Patience is not boring," he said. "Patience is the door. Everything you wish to do, you will do through that door, or you will not do it well." Up again. They came up. They settled. For the length of perhaps 10 breaths, the chamber held them in stillness, 4 small lives leaning into the shape of the men they would become, and the old rat at the center of them closed his eyes and let himself, for those 10 breaths, simply rest in what he had been given. On the 11th breath, he heard the crying. It was faint and far, and threaded through the noise of the rising water so finely that for a moment he took it for the water itself, for some new pitch in the rush that the storm had wrung out of the pipes. He did not move. He listened past the listening, as he had taught himself in a cage in another country, in another life, when listening had been the only thing that had kept his mind his own. The sound came again. It rose and it broke, and it steadied into the particular ragged rhythm that nothing in the world makes but one thing. Splinter opened his eyes. "Sensei." Leonardo had felt the change in him before the others, and his small face had gone serious under the blue cloth. "Quiet," Splinter said, and he said it so gently that all 4 of them went silent at once, even Michelangelo, even Raphael, who as a rule treated instructions as the opening offer in a negotiation. "Listen, tell me what you hear." They listened, the water, the wind in a far shaft mourning, the drip of the ceiling, and under it, threading up from somewhere east and below, the thin broken cry. "Is that?" Donatello started, his head tipped, his whole self gone to the question of it, because a question was the place where Donatello lived. "Sensei, that almost sounds like a baby," said Raphael, flat, certain, and not happy about it. "A child," Splinter agreed. He was already moving. He took his staff from the wall where it lined, and he took the lantern down from its hook, and the 4 of them scrambled up off the mat and were at his heels before he reached the archway, because where Splinter went, they went. That had been true since the beginning and would be true at the end. "Stay close. Stay behind me. The water is rising and the floor is false in places tonight. Step where I step." "Is it lost?" Michelangelo asked, trotting. "Down here. How does a baby get down here? Did it fall?" "Can babies even fall this far? That's a lot of falling." "We will ask it when it can speak," Splinter said, and went into the dark, and the lantern threw their 5 shadows long and leaping on the wet brick, and the crying pulled them on. The tunnels east of the platform ran downhill toward the old overflow, and on a night like this the old overflow filled, and Splinter did not like to go there in a storm and had never once let the children near it. He went there now. He went fast, and the staff in his hand tested the floor a stride ahead of his feet, tapping the brick for the hollow note that meant a grate had rusted through, and twice he stopped them with a flat hand and changed their path, and twice the crying nearly faded and then swelled again, closer. The smell changed as they descended, colder, mineral. The roar grew until it filled the bones of the tunnel, and they had to keep close to hear one another, and then the passage opened out, and the lantern light fell across a wide round room, where 3 channels met and emptied together over a lip of stone into a black throat that went down further than any of them had ever cared to learn. The water in this room moved fast and brown and loud, almost to the level of the raised brick walk that ringed it. And there, where 2 of the channels met and shoved their currents into a slow-turning eddy against the far wall, something pale rode the spin, caught, riding low, half-swamped, turning and turning under the lip of stone 6 feet from the edge where the floor fell away into the throat. A basket. And in the basket, lifted onto its elbows against the wicker, screaming now with the whole of its small strength, a child. "Sensei." Leonardo had seen it the same moment. He started forward and Splinter's staff came down across his chest, not hard, but absolute. "Number," the old rat's voice did not rise. It did not need to. "The floor ends there. You see the dark line in the brick. Past that there is no floor, there is only the fall." He set the lantern down where its light would reach the water and crouched and looked at the turning basket with the stillness of a thing made of stone, and behind that stillness his mind moved very fast. The eddy held the basket for now. The eddy would not hold it long. The currents that fed it were rising, and when they rose enough they would spit the basket out of the turning and into the seam where the 3 channels poured over the lip, and then the throat would have it, and nothing that went down the throat came back. He had perhaps a minute. He did not have a rope. He had 4 children he would not risk, and a staff, and his own 2 hands, and a body that had been, in its way, made for exactly this and no other thing. "Donatello," he said, the grating. The old maintenance grate against the wall where the third channel comes in. Is it sound? Donatello's eyes went to it, the bright, fast catalog of his attention sweeping the iron lattice bolted to the wall above the third inflow, and he answered as he always did, with the truth and nothing added. The top bolts are rusted. The bottom two are okay. It'll hold a little, not a lot, not for long and not for much. It will hold for what I need. Splinter rose. Raphael, Michelangelo. You will hold my son's weight on the walk here, where the brick is sound, and you will not, for any reason, for any cry I make, come past the dark line. Do you understand me? Look at my eyes. Do you understand me? Yes, Sensei, said Raphael, and for once there was no negotiation in it. Leonardo. You will hold the lantern, and you will hold it steady, and you will give me light where I ask for it. Donatello. You will watch the water above the third channel, and when it rises to the second bolt you will shout, and you will not wait to be sure, you will shout the moment it touches. A wrong warning costs us nothing. A late one costs us everything. He looked at each of them in turn, and each of them, even Michelangelo, gave him back a child's whole grave attention. Good. We are a stone in a river tonight, my sons, be the stone. He went out along the lip. He went as he had taught them to cross a beam, low, his weight rolling forward over the balls of his feet, his staff laid across his palms for balance, his tail a third counterweight feeling the air behind him. The brick under the dark line was slick, and the spray came up off the throat in a fine cold breath, and 1 hand width past the line the floor narrowed to a ledge no wider than his foot, a ledge that had been a maintenance step in some forgotten year, and was now a wet stone tongue hanging over nothing. He set his feet sideways and edged out along it with his back to the wall and his eyes on the turning basket, and the roar climbed into his teeth. The basket spun close, then away. Close, then away. The eddy turned it past him at the bottom of its arc, just out of the reach of his staff, and carried it up the far side and brought it down again, and each time it came down it sat a finger lower in the water than the time before. Sensei, it's at the third bolt. Donatello's voice cracked high over the water. Rising fast, I see it. He had perhaps 3 more turns of the eddy. He laid the staff out across the dark water, hooked it under the basket's rim as it came down past him, and pulled, and the current pulled back, and for one long beat it was the old rat's 2 arms against the whole weight of the storm pouring down through the city, and the storm was stronger. The storm was always stronger, and that had never once been the point. He did not try to win against the river. He turned its own pull. He let the staff in the current swing the basket up out of the eddy and across the throat in a fast brown arc, and at the top of the arc, where the water let it go for a single weightless instant, he dropped the staff and caught the basket out of the air with both hands. The weight of it nearly took him into the throat. His heels slid off the back of the ledge. His tail whipped flat against the wall and found a seam and locked, and his shoulder hit brick, and he hung there a moment with the screaming basket crushed to his chest and the fall breathing up cold against the soles of his feet. And then he gathered what he was and walked himself back up the tongue of stone, sideways, slow, until the dark line passed under his feet and there was floor again, true floor, and 4 small green bodies hit him all at once and nearly put him back over the edge for good. You got it, Sensei, you got it. You said don't come past the line and we didn't, we totally didn't, but can we come past the line now? Is it okay? Is the baby okay? Why is it so loud? Is loud good or bad? Off, Splinter said, laughing now, truly laughing, a dry rolling sound none of them heard often. Off, off, you small avalanche, give me room, and he sank down onto the dry brick with his back against the wall and the basket in his lap, and the 4 of them packed in around him so tightly that not one drop of the cold seemed able to reach him through them. And together they looked down into the basket at the thing he had carried out of the throat of the storm. It was a child of perhaps a year, perhaps a little more, soaked through, red-faced, roaring at the world in the total uncomplicated way of the very young. Dark hair lay plastered in wet feathers across a round skull. The screaming had begun to break apart now that the turning had stopped, fraying into hiccups and gulps, and between the gulps 2 eyes opened and found the lantern, and then found, above the lantern, the long whiskered face of the old rat bent close. They were green. Even in the bad light, even half-drowned, they were a green like nothing else down here in the world of brown water and gray brick, a green that did not belong in a sewer and seemed to know it. "Hello," said Splinter softly. "Hello, little one, you have had a very bad night." The child looked at him and did not scream. The hiccups went on, but the screaming stopped, and one wet fist came loose from the wicker and reached up and closed around a single whisker and held on with the grip of someone who had decided not to fall any further tonight. "Thank you, not ever again." "Whoa," breathed Michelangelo. "Sensei, it likes you. It is holding my face. That's how babies say they like you, I think. Donnie, is that how babies say they like you?" "I have literally no data on babies," said Donatello, leaning in with his whole curious self, but it stopped crying when it saw him, so behaviorally, yes, that tracks. He reached out one careful finger and let the child consider it, and the child considered it gravely and then sneezed, and Donatello pulled the finger back as though it had been bitten. It works. The face thing works. I want to try the face thing. Raphael had not said anything. He hunched at the rim of the basket with his shoulders drawn up high and his mouth pressed to a hard flat line, holding his face shut against whatever had gotten in under it, refusing to let any of them watch it land, and he was looking at the wet feathered hair plastered to the round skull, and he reached out and with one blunt finger, very gently, pushed a strand of it off the child's forehead so it would not drip in those green eyes. And there, under the hair, on the skin above the right eyebrow, was a mark. It was a thin red line cut clean into a shape, a jagged stroke with a fork in it, like a crack run through glass, like the afterimage a man keeps behind his eyes when he has watched the sky split open in a storm. It was not a scratch. It had the smoothness of something long healed. On a child this young there was no possible night in which such a mark could have been made and gone smooth, and Splinter looked at it for a long moment and felt the small hairs lift along his arms, and he did not yet have a single word to put to the feeling, only the certainty that he was looking at the edge of a story far larger than a basket in a flood. Lightning, Leonardo said quietly. Had the lantern still, and he had tipped it so the light fell true on the mark. It looks like lightning. It looks like a scar, Raphael said. Who scars a baby? And there was a hardness in it that was older than he was, and Splinter set a hand on the back of his red-banded son's neck and let it rest there, and Raphael allowed it, which on most nights he would not have. Someone somewhere has done this child a great wrong, Splinter said. That is the only thing the mark tells us for certain. The rest we do not know. We do not know who left it in the dark, or whether they live, or whether they grieve it, or whether they hunt it. He looked down into the green eyes, which had begun, between hiccups, to grow heavy. But I will tell you what I know, and I will tell you now, because a thing said over a child in the first hour is a thing the world hears. This child will not go back into the dark. Not tonight, not while I draw breath. Whatever it is ours now. The water roared in the throat below them, and the rain came down on the city far above, and 4 small green suns looked at the old rat and at the child in his lap and understood, in the wordless way of children who already know what family is because they have been given nothing else, that something in the count of them had changed and would not change back. 6, said Michelangelo wonderingly. There's 6 of us now. 5 sons, Splinter said, and his voice was not quite steady, which none of them had ever heard before and none of them would mention. I have 5 sons. Let us take the 5th one home before he catches his death of a cold he has very much earned. He rose with the basket in his arms. He left the staff. The staff had done its work, and a staff could be carved again, and what he carried now could not. He went up out of the room where the 3 channels met, and the 4 of them went with him, packed close, Leonardo before with the lantern and Raphael behind with his hand never quite leaving the edge of the basket, and the crying did not come again, because the child had decided to sleep, and a child only sleeps where it has decided it is safe. The lair was warm. Splinter had made it warm over years, by hand, by patience, by the slow theft of heat from the city's own veins. A steam pipe ran along one wall, and he had rapped it and tapped it and turned its warmth into the room. Candles stood in the niches where the old platform tiles had cracked away, and a brazier of salvaged iron held a low red bed of coals near the sleeping mats, and rugs that the city had thrown out, and Splinter had carried home and beaten clean lay layered 3 deep over the cold brick of the floor. It smelled of wax and of tea, and of the particular green clean smell of 4 young turtles who had been made, against every protest, to scrub behind their shells before bed. He set the basket down by the brazier and went to work, because work was a kind of prayer, and the child needed prayer more than it needed his trembling. He stripped the soaked clothes away, and they were good clothes. He saw, fine soft wool and cotton, sewn well, a child of some house that had money or had once had it. Inside the basket, tucked down along the side where the flood had not quite reached it, wrapped twice in oilcloth against exactly this, was a folded square of heavy cream paper, and Splinter set it aside to dry without opening it, because the child came first and the paper would keep. He warmed a cloth at the brazier and cleaned the grime of the flood from the small body and found it sound, unhurt, a child only cold and frightened and tired past the end of itself, and he wrapped it in the softest of the salvaged blankets, the gray one with the worn satin edge that Michelangelo had slept under as an infant and had finally, the winter before, agreed he was too old for, and which Michelangelo now watched go around the new child without one word of complaint. Which told Splinter more about his orange-banded son's heart than a year of lectures could have. He warmed milk. They had milk because 4 growing turtles drank a great deal of it, and Splinter walked far at night to get it. He soaked a clean corner of cloth and let the child suck the warmth from it while he held the small weight against his chest and rocked, slowly, the old motion, the oldest motion there is, the one no living thing is ever taught and every living thing somehow knows. The 4 of them sat in a ring and watched and did not, for once, fill the silence. Leonardo had brought tea and set the cups out without being asked. Raphael had positioned himself between the basket and the archway and the cold tunnels beyond it, and there he stayed, on guard against a flood that had already done its worst, because a body needs to stand somewhere when its heart is doing more than it knows how to carry. Donatello had taken the wet fine clothes and laid them by the coals to dry, and was examining the stitching of them by candlelight, reading them for what they could tell him, because reading a thing was how Donatello held it close. Michelangelo had simply come as near as the basket would allow, and put his head against Splinter's arm and watched the child drink. He came down the throat, Donatello said quietly, turning a sleeve to the light. All that water, all that drop, and there's not a scratch on these clothes that the flood didn't make tonight. Whoever dressed him this morning had no idea where he'd be sleeping. He smoothed the small damp collar flat with one finger. I keep doing the math on it. The odds of the basket catching that eddy instead of going over. The odds of us being at drills tonight and not asleep. The odds of Sensei hearing one cry through all that noise. He looked up, and the candlelight caught the wet shine he would not have admitted to. I can't make the numbers work, Sensei. There's no version of tonight where this kid lives, and here he is. There are nights, Splinter said, when the world chooses to be larger than its arithmetic. We do not question such nights. We feed the fire and we keep the watch and we are grateful. He shifted the warm weight against his chest. Tonight is one of those nights, my son. Do the math tomorrow. What's its name? Mikey asked at last, very low. I do not know. Can we name it? Perhaps it already has a name. Perhaps someone somewhere says it in their sleep tonight. Splinter looked toward the folded cream paper drying by the coals. When the little one sleeps, I will read what was left with him, and we will see what the paper knows. The child drank and slowed, and the heavy green eyes lost their fight by degrees, opening slower each time and at last not opening at all, and the small fist that had taken a fold of Splinter's robe in its grip did not let go even in sleep. Splinter sat with the weight of it and felt his own breathing settle around the rhythm of the smaller breath, and the candles burned, and the storm walked away over the city toward the sea. When the child was deep enough that Splinter could move without waking it, he laid it in the basket beside the brazier with the gray blanket tucked close, and he took up the cream paper and unfolded it by the light of the nearest candle. The flood had reached one corner and bled the ink there into a blue ghost, but the rest was sound, and the hand was a woman's, fast, pressed hard, the letters leaning forward as though she had written them already running. He read it twice, the first time for the words. The second time for what was under the words. Most of it he could not understand, and he was wise enough to know at once that the not understanding was the most important thing in the letter. It spoke of a war he had never heard named. It spoke of a man it would not call by name, a man it called only him, and it spoke of that man the way the very brave speak of the very terrible. It begged whoever found the child to keep him hidden, to keep him far, to tell no one in a world it called by a word Splinter did not know. It said the child was in danger from enemies, and the writer feared from friends. It said she did not know if she would reach the place she was running to. And at the bottom, under all of it, pressed so hard the pen had nearly torn the paper, were 4 words and a 5th that the flood had not been allowed to touch. His name is Harry. Splinter sat with the paper a long while. The coals ticked and settled. In the basket, the child slept the bottomless sleep of the very young and the very safe. From the archway, Raphael watched his father read and read again, and at last fold the paper closed. Sensei, Raphael's voice carried low across the warm room. What's it say? The old rat looked up, and his eyes moved across the 4 of them, his sons, the lives he had been given against all sense in a world that had no place for any of them, and then they came to rest on the 5th shape sleeping by the fire. It says, he answered, that there are people in the world above us who fear this child, and people who would use him, and people who loved him enough to die carrying him to the dark, rather than let either kind have him. It says he was running from a war when the storm took him from the woman who carried him, and it says his name. What is it? Leonardo asked. Harry, said Splinter, and the name settled into the room and stayed there, and on the mat by the brazier the child stirred at the sound of it and did not wake. His name is Harry. He did not sleep that night. He sat by the brazier with his sons gone at last to their mats, 4 humped green shapes breathing slow in the dark, and he kept the coals fed and the basket close, and he turned the whole strange shape of the night over and over in his hands like a stone whose grain he was learning. He was not a foolish creature. He had not always been what he was now, and the part of him that remembered being other than this, the part that had walked once on two legs and lived once in the sun, knew the world held more in it than most of the world admitted. He had been changed by something no science Donatello would ever read about could explain. He had crawled up out of a broken jar of glowing ooze into a body that thought and a mind that grew. And if that could be true then, he had no standing whatsoever to call any other impossible thing a lie. The letter spoke of a hidden world and a secret war and a man too terrible to name, and Splinter believed it, because Splinter had learned the hard and useful lesson that the line men draw around the possible is drawn for their comfort and not for the truth. So he sat and he thought, not about whether the danger was real, but about what an old rat in a sewer could possibly do to stand between a child and a war that had reached across an ocean to find it. He had no money and no allies and no country. He had a hidden home and the patience of a creature who had survived a cage, and a body and a mind trained in the one art he had carried whole out of his old life into this one. He had 4 sons who would, he already knew, walk into any fire on this earth if their father asked it, and who must therefore be taught never to walk into a fire that did not need them. And he had, sleeping by his fire, a 5th child marked by lightning, hunted by a darkness with no name, who knew nothing yet of any of it and deserved, before the world remembered him, to be small and safe and held. Toward the deepest part of the night, when the coals had burned to a red whisper and the candles guttered, the child woke. It did not cry. It opened its green eyes and found itself in a strange place, and it lay very still the way frightened things lie still, and it looked for something it knew. The single candle nearest the basket had drowned in its own wax an hour before and gone dark, and the room was nearly black, and the child's breath quickened toward a sound that would have been the start of a wail. And the candle relit. Splinter saw it happen. He was looking at the child, and he was looking at the candle, because his eyes had been moving between the two for hours, and so he saw the dead black wick where no ember lived sit up of its own accord into a clean yellow flame, with no draught, with no spark, with nothing at all but a frightened child wishing very hard not to be alone in the dark. The child saw the light come back and made a satisfied sound and closed its eyes and went back to sleep. Splinter did not move for a long time. He looked at the steady flame standing up out of a wick that had no business holding it, and he looked at the sleeping child who had called it back without knowing it had reached for anything at all, and very slowly, in the warm dark of the lair, the old rat began to understand the true size of the thing the storm had given him. Not only a child hunted by a hidden war, a child with a fire in it. A child who, in fear, in the dark, asleep at the edge of a cry, could bend the world to give it back its light. He had spent his life learning to make the body still so that the spirit could move freely through it. He had spent it learning that force is the crudest of all answers and balance the deepest, that the river that bends survives the winter that breaks the river that will not. He looked at the candle the child had lit and he knew, with the quiet certainty that had carried him through every hard thing he had ever done, that he had been handed the one student no one else in the world could teach, and that whatever was coming for this child across the dark water of years, it would find when it came that the child had not been hidden idle. It would find a wizard. He did not have that word yet. That word would come later, on a green-inked envelope, in another year. But he understood the shape of it that night by the dying coals, and he gave it the only name he had. A spirit, he thought, gazing at the flame. A very strong spirit, and very young and very frightened, and very far from anyone who could tell it what it is. Well, he drew the gray blanket up over the small shoulder and tucked it close. Then it is good, little one, that you have come to a house that knows how to teach a strong spirit to be still. He fed the last of the coals. He let the new candle burn. Morning in the lair did not arrive. It seeped. The grates high in the vaulted ceiling went from black to charcoal to a thin watered gray, and the gray fell in soft bars across the rugs, and the brothers woke into it the way they always did, by smell, the smell of Splinter setting the kettle on the brazier the moment there was light enough to call it a new day. Michelangelo woke first, which never happened, and the reason it happened was that he had gone to sleep with one question and woke holding it. He rolled off his mat and crossed the cold floor on bare feet and stopped at the edge of the basket and looked down, plainly half sure the whole night had been a thing he had dreamed. It had not. Harry was awake. He lay on his back under the gray blanket with both fists up by his ears, studying the curve of the ceiling far above with the total concentration of a creature seeing a sky for the first time, and when an orange-banded face leaned into that sky and grinned at him upside down, he considered it gravely, and then he laughed. It was not a large sound. It came out of him in a surprised, hiccuping burst, the laugh of someone who had not known he had one in him, and it went straight through the quiet lair and struck 3 more sleeping turtles awake where they lay. He laughed. Michelangelo announced to the room, to the world, to the future, with the gravity of a herald. Guys. He laughed at me. Sensei, did you hear it? He thinks I'm funny. This is the best day of my entire life. I heard it, Splinter said from the kettle, and did not turn around at once, because there are some looks a father keeps to himself until they settle. When he did turn, he carried tea, and he lowered himself down by the basket among his crowding sons, and he lifted the laughing child up out of the wicker and into the gray morning light where all of them could see him plain. Harry, he said, holding the small warm weight so the green eyes could travel from face to face to face, blue and red and purple and orange, and at last the long whiskered gray of the one who had carried him out of the water. These are your brothers, Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo. Each of them, named, leaned in, and Harry reached for each of them in turn and got a finger of Donnie's and a thumb of Raph's and the whole of Mikey's grin. And I am your father. You do not understand a word I am saying, which is the only reason I can say it without my voice betraying me. So I will say all of it now, while you are too young to hold me to it, and then I will spend the rest of my life proving it true. You are home, you are safe, you are wanted. Whatever comes for you across the years, it will have to come through this family first, and this family does not break. The kettle steamed, the gray light strengthened. And in a warm room far under a city that had already begun to forget the storm, a child who had been thrown away by one world laughed in the arms of another, and the long strange road that had carried him here ran on, out of sight, toward all the things that were still to come. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, 5 Sons. 3 winters later, the lair had learned the shape of a child who could walk. It had learned it the hard way, which is the only way a home ever learns anything. Donatello had moved his sharpest tools up onto a high shelf and built a latched box for the rest. Leonardo had walked the whole platform on his knees one afternoon, looking for edges at the height of a small skull, and had sanded 3 of them smooth. Raphael had carried the loose lengths of pipe out of the training cave, because a length of pipe was, to a creature of 3, less a danger than an invitation. And Michelangelo had simply appointed himself, without anyone's leave, the guardian of all the parts of the world that Harry was not yet allowed to touch, which in practice meant that wherever Harry went there went also a green shape walking backward in front of him, arms out, narrating. Okay, so that's the hot pipe. We don't touch the hot pipe. We love the hot pipe from a respectful distance. And that's the deep part of the channel. We don't go near the deep part. The deep part is for nobody. And that's Raph's weights. We don't pick up Raph's weights. You couldn't pick up Raph's weights. They weigh more than you. It would be embarrassing for both of us. Harry walked after him with the wide rolling stagger of the newly upright, both hands fisted in the air for balance, and listened to all of it with the gravity of a judge, and understood perhaps 1 word in 9, and adored every one of them. It was morning, by the clock the surface kept, though down here morning was a thing you chose to believe in. Splinter believed in it firmly and made the rest of them believe in it too. The kettle went on at the first gray light through the grates. The mats came out. And whatever else the day held, it began the same way every day began, with the 6 of them in a loose ring on the practice floor and the old rat at the center of it, and a single candle burning on the low table before him. Sit, said Splinter. 4 turtles sat, folding down into the cross-legged seat they had been folding into since before they could remember not knowing how. Harry sat too, because Harry did whatever the brothers did, and Harry's version of sitting was a controlled collapse that ended with him more or less upright and extremely proud of it, and Splinter inclined his head to him as gravely as he inclined it to the others, because a thing done with the whole of a small heart deserved the whole of an old one's respect. Breathe, said Splinter. They breathed. The candle stood straight. The steam pipe ticked along the wall, and far off in the tunnels a train went by on its track and shook a fine dust down through the gray bars of light, and the family breathed together in the dust and the light, and for the length of that breathing the city above them did not exist, and the war the cream paper had spoken of did not exist, and there was only the candle and the quiet and the 6 of them. Harry lasted, on a good morning, 9 breaths. On this morning he lasted 4, and then he noticed the candle, really noticed it, the small live wavering brightness of it, and he leaned forward out of his collapse and reached for it with the total directness of the very young, who do not yet know that fire is a thing you are not allowed to hold. Splinter's hand was there first, not fast. He had no need to be fast. He had been watching the reach build in Harry's shoulders 3 breaths before it arrived, because watching the build was the whole of the art, and he had spent 50 years on it. His finger came down and folded the small reaching hand gently closed and set it back on the small knee, and Harry looked up at him, unoffended, ready to be taught. Not with the hand, Splinter said. The hand is too loud. Watch. He turned his own gaze to the flame and let it rest there, and he breathed, and the flame leaned. It leaned toward him, away from him, a slow bow back and forth in time with the breath, and it did this because Splinter had spent decades learning to move air with intention so fine that no one watching could see him do it, and to a child of 3, it was indistinguishable from the working of the deepest magic in the world. Harry's mouth fell open. He looked from the bowing flame to the old rat's face and back, and then he turned to the candle and screwed his whole self up into the project of making it bow for him, and he breathed at it the enormous gusty breath of a child, and the candle went out. There was a silence. "Mikey," said Raphael, not opening his eyes, "your boy put out Sensei's candle. He's everyone's boy, Raph, don't make it weird, and also that was awesome." Michelangelo opened one eye. "Do it again, Harry, do the thing again." "He is not going to," Donatello began and stopped, because Harry had drawn in another breath, and this one he did not let out. He held it. He held it as he had just watched his father hold a flame in a bow, with his small face gone fierce and still, and his green eyes fixed on the dark wick, and he wanted, with the whole undivided wanting of a creature too young to want more than one thing at a time, for the light to come back. The wick relit. It came up clean and yellow, with no spark, and no draft, and no match, the same as it had come up in the dark by the brazier 3 years before, the same as it had come up a dozen times since, in a dozen small unwatched moments that Splinter had marked and counted and said nothing about. But the brothers had never seen it happen on purpose, in the light, with all of them looking, and 4 turtles went very still around the little table, and the dust drifted down through the gray bars, and the candle burned as though nothing in the world were strange about a child of 3 lighting a fire with the inside of his chest. Harry let his held breath go. He beamed at the flame. Then he beamed at Splinter, for praise, because that was the order of things. You did the thing, and then you looked at Sensei. Splinter gave it to him. He set his hand on the crown of the dark, untidy head and let it rest there, warm, the gesture he gave each of them when they had done a hard thing well, and Harry leaned up into the weight of the hand and was happy. "Good," said Splinter softly. "That was very good, my son. Now we will learn the harder lesson, which is when not to." He gathered them after, when Harry had gone down for the sleep that children of 3 still owe the afternoon, and he sat his 4 older sons on the practice floor and was quiet a while before he spoke, choosing the words as he chose, footing on bad brick. "You have all seen it before now," he said. "I know you have, the candles. The cup that came to his hand across the table last winter when he was too tired to crawl for it. The day the heavy grate fell and did not strike him, the day Raphael swears the grate stopped in the air, and I have not told Raphael he was right, and Raphael, you were right." Raphael's hands opened on his knees. "I knew it. I knew I saw it. You all said I was. We said you were excited," Donatello allowed, "which, to be fair, is your whole, factory setting." "This is not a small thing," Splinter went on, and the room came back to him. "I have lived long enough to know that the world is wider than what touches the eye, and you 4 are proof of it before you say a word. But Harry is a different kind of wide. The paper that came with him spoke of a hidden people and a hidden war, and I believe now that Harry is one of those people, and that what we are watching wake up in him is the thing that makes them what they are. It is power. It is real, and it is large, and it lives in a child who cannot yet be trusted not to put it in his mouth. So what do we do?" Leonardo asked. He had gone to the place he went when something was set in front of him to be carried, the still readiness that would one day make men follow him. "How do you train something nobody down here knows how to do?" "We do not train the power," said Splinter. "We cannot. None of us knows its rules, and a teacher who pretends to know what he does not know is worse than no teacher at all. So we will not teach Harry to be a wizard, because we cannot. We will teach him to be still. We will teach him balance and patience and the long mastery of his own breath and his own fear, and we will trust that a spirit which has learned to hold itself quiet will hold its power quiet too, until the day comes when someone who knows the rules can teach him the rest." He looked at each of them. "Power without discipline is the most dangerous thing in the world. You have seen what men with power and no discipline do in the world above, on the nights we go up. We will not raise such a creature here. Whatever Harry becomes, he will be balanced first. The rest can be learned. Balance cannot be added later. Balance is the floor you build the house upon. And if it gets away from him," Raphael said, "if it's bigger than he is and it just goes off, he's 3, Sensei. You can't tell a 3-year-old to be balanced." "No," Splinter agreed, "you cannot tell him. You can only show him, every day, 10,000 days, until the showing has become the shape of him, and there is no telling left to do." He rose. "Which is why we will all of us be very, very calm around your brother. A child learns the temperature of a room before he learns its words. If this family is a still pond, Harry's power will learn to be a still pond. If this family is a storm, it will learn to be a storm. So, he looked down at them and something in his whiskered face eased. Be a still pond, my sons, even you, Raphael, especially you. I'm extremely calm, said Raphael. I'm the calmest guy down here. Michelangelo opened his mouth. Don't, said Raphael. The candle became the center of Harry's days. Not the candle alone, but the thing the candle stood for, which Splinter named, when Harry was old enough for names, the still pond. Every morning Harry sat before the flame and learned to breathe without reaching, to want the light without grabbing at it, to feel the power gather in his chest and to hold it there, banked, the way you bank coals so they keep through the night without burning the house. Some mornings the candle bowed for him. Some mornings when he was tired or cross or had been woken by a dream he would not describe, the candle flared up tall and guttered and threw wax, and on those mornings Splinter did not scold and did not praise, but only said, "The pond has a wind on it today. Sit with the wind, do not fight it. Let it pass over the water and be gone." And Harry would sit, small and furious at his own failure, and breathe. And slowly the flame would come back down to true, and Splinter would say nothing more because the lesson had taught itself, which is the only way the deep lessons ever take. By 5, Harry could relight the candle without a held breath, with no more than a glance and a settling. By 5 he could also do other things, and the other things were the trouble, because they came when he was not settled, when he was startled or thrilled or stung, and they came without asking. A cup leapt to his hand. A dropped bowl hung an inch above the stone and waited to be caught. Once when Raphael lost at a game of stones and swept the board in mock disgust, every stone on it rose into the air and hung there spinning, and Raphael looked at the spinning stones and then looked at Harry, who looked back, alarmed at himself, and Raphael said very evenly, "Okay, new rule. Harry wins all games of stones forever. I concede. Put my stones down, buddy," and Harry put the stones down, and the two of them did not speak of it, and that was the day Raphael stopped, somewhere under his armor, being afraid of his youngest brother's gift, because he had learned that the gift, like the brother, did not want to hurt anyone. It only wanted not to fall. Donatello took a different road to the same place. Donatello wanted to measure it. He could not, of course. He tried. He rigged a scale and asked Harry to lift the pan with his mind and could never get a number that meant anything, because the power did not answer to numbers, it answered to wanting, and wanting could not be weighed. He held a compass near Harry's relit candle and watched the needle and learned nothing. He built, over a patient month, a little wheel of folded paper balanced on a pin, the kind that turns in the faintest breath, and he set it before Harry and said, "Don't blow on it. Just want it to turn," and Harry wanted it to turn, and it turned, and Donatello watched it turn with the particular joy of a mind that has found a locked door it knows it will spend the rest of its life learning to open. "I can't explain you," he told Harry once. The two of them bent together over the turning wheel in the lamplight of the workshop, Donnie's tools racked behind them and 100 half-built things hanging from the ceiling on threads. "You know that. I can explain everything else down here. I can explain the lights, the water, why the trains shake loose the dust at midnight. I can explain Sensei mostly. I can't explain you. You break the rules I use to understand the world." Harry, who was 6 by then and took everything his brothers said with total seriousness, considered this. "Is that bad?" "No," said Donatello, and he meant it with his whole self. "No, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Don't you dare start making sense. Promise me, if you ever start making sense, I'll never forgive you." "I promise," said Harry solemnly, and the paper wheel turned between them in the lamplight, and somewhere down the tunnel Michelangelo was teaching himself a song on a found harmonica, badly, and the lair held all of it, the way a cupped hand holds water. The trouble that everyone had been waiting for, the trouble Splinter had been bracing the whole family against since the morning of the candle, did not come from the power. It came from Harry being 6, and from the world above having a roof you could climb to. The brothers went up at night. They had always gone up, the surface was theirs in the hours when the surface forgot to look, and Splinter permitted it within rules so strict and so old that the boys no longer experienced them as rules but as the grain of the world. Stay above the street, in the high country of the rooftops, where no one thinks to look up. Move only between shadows. If a civilian sees your shape, you are never there, you do not explain, you do not reassure, you vanish, because the kindest thing you can give a frightened stranger is the chance to decide they imagined you. And never, never take Harry, because Harry was small and Harry was slow on the climbs, and Harry, alone among them, could be hurt by the city in all the ordinary ways and in some extraordinary ones besides. Harry, being 6, found this unbearable, and being 6, did something about it. He waited until a night when Splinter was deep in the meditation that took him, on the dark of the moon, somewhere none of his sons could follow. He waited until the 4 of them had gone up the long shaft to the rooftops, and then he climbed the shaft after them, alone in the dark, with his heart going like a found harmonica, telling himself the whole way up that he was a ninja, that he had watched them do this 1,000 times, that he would simply appear on the roof beside Mikey and B, at last, one of the night. He came up out of the shaft and into a world he had never seen. The roof was tar and gravel and a low wall at its edge, and beyond the wall was the city, and the city was enormous past anything the lair had taught him to expect. A black field of towers stuck full of lights, lights in their thousands, lights in their tens of thousands, gold and white and red, and a far blinking ruby high up on the tallest of them, and over it all a sky that was not a vaulted ceiling, not a grate, not a bar of gray, but an actual open nothing that went up and never stopped. Harry stood at the lip of the shaft with the wind in his face, the real wind, the high cold wind off the river that the tunnels never got, and he forgot entirely the brothers he had climbed to find. He walked toward the low wall in the enormous lit world, and he put his hands on the cold gritty top of it, and he leaned out into all that space and all those lights, and his whole small chest filled up with something that had no name and did not need one. He did not hear the maintenance door open on the far side of the roof. He did not hear it, but Raphael did. Raphael, 2 rooftops east, heard the cough of a hinge that should not have coughed, and turned and saw against the glow of the city a thing that stopped the breath in him cold. A small dark shape standing at the edge of a roof, lit up plain as day, and 40 feet from it a night worker coming out of a stairwell with a flashlight, and the flashlight already swinging up, already rising toward the small shape at the wall. There was no time to think, and Raphael did not think. He moved. He crossed 2 rooftops in the time it takes to describe one of them, a low flat run with everything he had in it, and he did the only thing left to do, which was the thing they had all been taught, and which now had to be done faster and cleaner than any of them had ever done it, with a 6-year-old's life inside the margin. The flashlight beam found the wall, it found the gravel, it found the low parapet where a small shape had been standing 1/4 of a second before. There was nothing there. The worker stood in his own beam and frowned at an empty roof and a low wall and the enormous indifferent city beyond it, and he played the light along the parapet, and he told himself a story about tired eyes and long shifts, the way people do, the kind story, and after a moment he went back through the stairwell door, and the door coughed shut behind him. Below the parapet, on the 18-inch ledge of a window washer's track that ran outside the wall over a drop of 9 floors, Raphael held his youngest brother against the brick with one arm like an iron band and pressed his other hand flat over Harry's mouth, and did not breathe, and did not let Harry breathe, until the cough of the door had come and gone, and the night had closed back over them clean. Then he breathed, then he let Harry breathe. And then very quietly in the dark, on a ledge over a 9-floor drop with the wind pulling at both of them, Raphael came apart in the only direction he knew how to come apart, which was toward. Don't you ever. His voice shook, and he let it. Don't you ever, do you hear me? Do you understand what almost? He had a light on you, Harry. One more second and he sees you, and then he tells someone, and then they come looking, and then it's over, all of it, for everybody. Do you get that? Not just you. All of us. Sensei, the lair, everything. Because you wanted to see the sky. Harry, crushed against the brick, with the whole enormous lit drop hanging under his feet, and his fierce, furious brother's heart going like a drum against his back, did the thing that no one had taught him, the thing the power did when his own breath failed him. He reached out without meaning to, for something to hold, and there was nothing on the ledge to hold, and so the power closed his small cold hand around a fistful of the night air itself, and the air went solid, a grip on nothing, a knot in the empty dark, and it held them both, and Raphael felt the ledge stop being the only thing between his brother and the fall, and looked down and saw Harry's fist closed white-knuckled around a handful of absolutely nothing, and the nothing bearing weight. "Okay's," Raphael breathed. Okay, buddy, I got you, the air's got you, we're good. And he gathered the small shaking body against his plastron and went back over the wall as he had come, smooth and silent, and did not let go. And on the safe side of the parapet, he sat down hard in the gravel with Harry in his lap and held on, and Leonardo and Donatello and Michelangelo came across the rooftops out of the dark and folded down around the 2 of them without a word, the 4 of them in the 5th. A green wall against the wind, and that was how the night found them. And the city glittered on and never knew. Splinter did not shout. That was the part Harry remembered longest, the rest of his life, that his father came up out of the meditation and learned what had happened and did not shout. He listened to all of it, Raphael's account given straight and unsparing with Raphael's own failure left in, the failure of an older brother who had gone up and not counted heads, and Splinter heard that too and set his hand on Raphael's shoulder over it. Then he sent the four of them to their mats, and he took Harry into the training cave alone, and he lit the candle, and he sat down across the low table from his youngest son and was quiet for a long time. "Tell me what you saw," he said at last. "Up there. Tell me the true thing, not the sorry thing. You will be sorry later and we will let you. First, tell me what you saw." Harry's eyes were red and he had been holding the sorry in his throat for an hour, but his father had asked for the true thing and so he reached past the sorry for it. "The sky," he said. "It doesn't stop. I always thought it stopped, like the ceiling, just higher. It doesn't stop. And the lights. There's so many lights, Sensei. There's more lights than there are anything down here. There's more lights than I can count, and Donnie can count really high." His voice wobbled. "I wanted to see it so bad. I'm not sorry I saw it. I'm sorry about the worker. I'm sorry I scared Raph, but I'm not sorry about the sky and I don't know how to be." And Splinter, across the candle, let out a breath that had a laugh somewhere far down inside it, and Harry understood that he was not, after all, in the worst kind of trouble, only the ordinary kind. "Good," his father said. "Never be sorry for the sky. The sky is yours. It is yours more than it is mine, more than it is your brother's, because you came down to us out of it, and one day you will go back up into it in ways none of us can follow. I would not take the sky from you for all the safety in the world." He leaned forward, and the candlelight moved on his gray face. "But hear me, my son, because this is the lesson, and it is the hardest one I have, and I will give it to you only once tonight and then 10,000 times after, gentler each time. The shadow is not a cage. The shadow is a gift. We do not hide because we are ashamed. We hide because we have learned that a thing seen too soon is a thing destroyed. You wanted the sky and you took it, and you nearly bought it with everything, with the lair, with your brothers, with the only safe place there is. That is what wanting without patience costs. You felt the power come and catch you on the ledge tonight. Yes, the hand that closed on the air." Harry nodded, wide-eyed. "I didn't tell it to. It just came. It came because you were falling, and it loves you, and it will always come when you are falling. But a power that comes only when you are falling will spend its whole life saving you from falls you should never have taken. I do not want that for you. I want a power that comes when you call it calm on a still pond on a day you chose. And the only road from the one to the other is patience, is the shadow, is sitting before the candle 10,000 mornings when you would rather be on the roof." He held out his hand across the table, palm up, the old offer. "Will you walk that road with me? Not because you must, because you choose it. The road is no good if you do not choose it." And Harry, 6 years old, with the sky still burning behind his eyes and his brother's drumming heart still printed on his back, put his small hand into his father's enormous gentle one and chose. "Yes, Sensei. Then we begin again tomorrow." Splinter closed his hand around the small one. "And Harry, the sky is not going anywhere. It has waited an eternity for you already. It can wait until you are ready to take it without losing everything else. That is a promise. I will put you on a rooftop myself when you are ready, and we will watch the lights together, you and I, all night, and no one will catch us, because by then you will be too good to be caught." "Yes, yes, Sensei." And then, because he was 6, and because the worst was over and the love was rushing back into the room to fill the space the fear had left, all night, even past bedtime. "Do not," said Splinter, "press your advantage," and blew out the candle, and in the dark Harry laughed, and that was the end of the lesson and the beginning of the long keeping of the promise. There came a night, not long after, when Harry asked the question. He asked it the way the youngest asked the largest things, sideways, at the very edge of sleep, when the lair had gone dark and Splinter was making his last slow round of the mats. Harry lay on his back with the gray blanket pulled to his chin, older now and more worn and still his, and he watched his father's shape move between the sleeping shells of his brothers, and he said into the dark, "Sensei, where did I come from?" The shape stopped moving. Then it came and folded down beside him, cross-legged on the cold floor, close enough that Harry could find the warmth of it without looking. "You have wanted to ask that for some time," Splinter said. "I have watched it grow in you. I am glad you chose tonight. Some questions go bad if you keep them too long in the dark. Sit up. This is a sitting up kind of answer." Harry sat up. Splinter rose and went to the high shelf where the most important things lived, behind Donnie's latched box, and brought down a flat square of oilcloth, and from inside it a folded sheet of heavy cream paper gone soft at the creases from being read, and he set it in the lamplight between them with the care of a man handling the last leaf of a tree that no longer grew. "This came with you," he said. 6 years ago in a storm the city flooded, and the flood carried a basket down into the deep tunnels, and in the basket was a child who held onto a single one of my whiskers and would not let go. That was you. You were perhaps a year old. You were soaked through and you were not afraid of me, which no creature in the world had ever managed before, and I decided in that moment, before I had thought about it at all, that you were mine. He touched the folded paper but did not open it. A woman carried you to that storm. I never knew her name. She wrote this and tucked it in beside you, wrapped twice against the water, because she knew the water was coming and she wanted the words to live even if she did not. She wrote that there were people who wanted to hurt you, and people who wanted to use you, and she ran from all of them with you in her arms until she could run no further. She loved you enough to die carrying you to the dark rather than let the wrong hands close on you. I do not know if she was your mother. I think she was a stranger who decided you were worth her life. The world has both kinds in it, and on the night you needed one, you got one. Harry looked at the paper a long while. What does it say my name is? It says Harry. It is the only word in it I was certain of, and so it is the word I gave you, and it has fit you every day since. Splinter's hand found the crown of his head. The rest of it speaks of a hidden people and a hidden war, in words I do not fully understand even now. I believe you belong to that people. I believe the thing that wakes in you at the candle is their kind of power. And I believe that one day someone from that world will remember that they lost a child with a mark of lightning, and they will come looking, and they will find you. Maybe soon, maybe not for years, I do not know. But I want you to hear the next part with both ears, because it is the truest thing I will say to you tonight. He turned Harry gently by the shoulders so the lamp fell on the thin pale scar above his eyebrow. This was done to you before I found you. I do not know how or by whom, but a mark like this is not an accident, and someone in that hidden war wronged you very badly when you were too small to remember it. That is a hard thing to carry, so carry this instead. The scar is a record of something that was done to you. It does not get a vote in who you become. A man does not have to honor the worst thing that ever happened to him by letting it choose his shape. Whoever gave you that mark, whatever they meant by it, they do not get to name you. Only you name you, Harry. You and the road you choose and the people you let stand beside you while you walk it. The scar is the past. You are not the past. You are my son and the brother of 4 reckless turtles who would tear the city apart to keep you, and whatever else the world decides to make of you, it will have to get past all of that first. Harry put his finger to the scar, as he sometimes did when he forgot it was there. Will they be scary, the people who come? Some of them, perhaps. The world above is large and not all of it is kind. Splinter took the small hand down from the scar and held it. But you will not meet them the way that woman met them, alone in a storm with nothing. You will meet them as a creature who has been loved every single day of his life by people who do not break. That is the strongest armor there is, and you were wearing it before you could walk. Now lie down. The paper will keep. It has kept 6 years already. It can keep until you are grown enough to read it yourself. Harry lay down. Splinter folded the cream paper back into its oilcloth, and the lamp threw both their shadows up the curved wall, large and small, the rat and the child, and after a while Harry said very quietly, "Sensei, I'm glad the flood went the right way." "So am I, my son," said Splinter. "So am I sleep." The years after that found their rhythm, and the rhythm had a place in it for each of them, and the places were how Harry learned who he was. Leonardo gave him the forms. They rose together before the others, the 2 of them, the eldest and the youngest, and ran the kata in the gray pre-dawn until the movements stopped being movements and became a kind of standing still that happened to travel. Leo was patient in a way that had nothing to do with Splinter's deep ancient patience. Leo's patience was a craftsman's, exact, willing to do a single block 400 times because the 401st would be the first one that was true. Again, he would say in his brother's voice that was already learning to be a leader's, but this time don't try to do it right. Just do it. Trying is loud. Sensei says your power hears loud. So go quiet and let your arm remember. And Harry would go quiet and let his arm remember, and somewhere in the 400th repetition the block would arrive on its own, unbidden, perfect, and Leo would say nothing, which was how Leo said everything. Raphael gave him falling. It was the first thing Raph insisted on, after the rooftop, and he was immovable about it. Before Harry learned a single strike, he would learn to fall, because the ledge had taught Raph a thing he could not stop knowing, which was that the city was full of drops and the only question was whether you knew how to meet them. So they spent a season on the mats, and Raph threw him, gently and then less gently, and taught him to slap the ground and roll the force away along his shoulder and come up already moving, taught him that the ground was not the enemy, the panic was the enemy, the ground was just the ground and it would let you go if you did not fight it. You don't beat a fall, Raph told him, hauling him up for the 100th time. Nobody beats a fall. You make friends with it on the way down. You and the fall, you work it out together, and then you both get up and walk away. Again. and Harry fell, and somewhere in the falling stopped being afraid of the ground, and the not being afraid was a gift Raph had carried up off a 9-floor ledge and spent 2 years handing over one throw at a time. Donatello gave him the questions. The workshop was Harry's after the mats, the two of them among the hanging half-built things, and Donnie taught him that the power that broke all the rules was the best reason in the world to learn the rules cold, because you could not know what you were breaking until you knew what was there to break. They built things. They took things apart. Donnie taught him to solder and to wire and to read the city's discarded machines like a language, and in return Harry would, when Donnie was stuck, when the thing on the bench refused to work and the answer would not come, hold the broken thing in his 2 hands and go still, the candle's stillness, and want it to be whole, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, a circuit that should not have closed would close, and Donnie would whoop and write down the time and the date and a string of measurements that meant nothing. And the two of them would grin at each other over the working thing like a pair of thieves. And Michelangelo gave him joy, which is the hardest of all the gifts and the one no one thinks to be grateful for. Mikey taught him to laugh in the middle of a hard thing, which is a discipline as deep as any kata and a great deal rarer. Mikey named the pizzas. There was a ritual to it that had grown up over years, a solemn foolishness. When a pizza came home from the long midnight runs to the surface, Michelangelo would lay it on the table and consider it and give it a name, and the name had to fit, and the family had to ratify it, and Harry's job from the time he could talk was keeper of the names, which meant he remembered every pizza they had ever named and could be called upon to recite them, and did, on demand, with the gravity of a monk reciting scripture. The midnight avalanche, the sorrowful pepperoni. The one we do not speak of, which had olives. Harry kept the names, all of them, because Mikey had given him the keeping, and because in a life built on shadow and patience and the long discipline of a power that could break the world, somebody had to be in charge of the joy, and Mikey had looked at his small green-eyed brother and known him for the one. Splinter watched all of it. He watched his 4 sons divide their youngest brothers, raising among them without ever once being asked, each giving the thing he had to give, and he understood that he was watching the deepest training of all, the one no sensei can teach, the one that can only be caught. Harry was learning every day from 4 different directions at once that he was held, that the floor would not give, that when he fell, friends fell with him and worked it out on the way down. And Splinter knew, with the certainty that had not left him since the night of the candle, that whatever came for Harry across the dark water of the years, whatever hidden war remembered at last that it had lost its lightning-marked child, it would find when it came a creature it could not have prepared for, a wizard who had never once, in all his life, been alone. He banked the brazier. He listened to the lair breathe around him, 5 different sleeping rhythms he could name in the dark with his eyes shut, and he sat his watch as he had sat it the first night, as he would sit it for as long as he was given to sit it. The candle burned on the low table. Above them the city kept its thousand lights, and down in the warm dark the 5 sons of Splinter slept and grew, and one of them dreamed sometimes of a sky that did not stop and woke and was not afraid, because he knew now how to want a thing and wait for it both at once, which is the beginning of every strength there is. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The Discipline of the Unseen. By 11, Harry could cross the entire length of the lair without a single one of his brothers knowing he had moved. It had become a game, and then it had become more than a game, the way the deep things always start as games. Splinter said it as a test on the morning of Harry's 11th winter. Get from the east archway to the shrine at the far wall, past 4 turtles who had been told he was coming and given leave to catch him, and ring the small bell that hung above the candle. The catch was that the floor between was a minefield of Donnie's making, hung with tripwires and dry rice scattered to crunch underfoot and brass bells strung at ankle height, and the brothers were spread across the room with their eyes open and their ears sharp, and a standing wager among them about exactly how fast this was going to be over. It was not fast, and it was not over. That was the point. Harry went low along the east wall where a steam piped through a band of shadow, and he went slow, because Raphael had taught him years ago that speed is loud and patience is silent, and he breathed the candle breath the whole way, the still pond breath, because Leonardo had taught him that a quiet body needs a quiet mind to live in, or the quiet leaks out at the edges. He came to the first tripwire and did not step over it, because stepping over is when you fall. He laid 2 fingers on the rice scattered ahead of him and wanted it, gently, to be elsewhere, and a hand's width of dry rice slid aside without a sound and left him bare stone to set his foot on. He came to the brass bells strung at ankle height and did not duck them. He held them still with a thread of will as he passed, the way you hold a flame in a bow, so that even the breath of his going did not move them. When Michelangelo turned his head at exactly the wrong moment and looked straight at the band of shadow where Harry was, Harry did the hardest thing in the whole art, the thing Splinter rated above every strike and every leap. He did nothing at all. He went so still that the shadow kept him. Mikey's eyes slid over the place where his brother crouched and found a pipe in a wall and moved on. Harry rang the bell. The sound of it dropped into the room, and 4 turtles came up off the floor swearing in 4 distinct registers. He was on the east wall the whole. I looked right at him. I looked right at the spot. That's because he wanted you to look at the spot and see a pipe, said Donatello, already crouched over the scattered rice, reading the bare patch where it had slid aside, his whole face alight. He moved the rice. Look. He moved the rice without touching it, and then he walked on the floor he made. Harry. Harry, come here. Did you decide where the rice went, or did it just go? Because those are extremely different, and I need to know which. Donnie, Splinter's voice came warm from the shrine. Let your brother breathe before you take him apart. Harry came up out of his stillness and into himself, and the room came back, and his brother's noise washed over him, and he stood in the middle of it with the bell still humming, and let himself be pleased, in the banked and quiet way his father had taught him, the way you let a coal be warm without letting it set the house alight. Splinter came down from the shrine and walked a slow circle around his youngest son, looking at him with the long, assessing look that took in everything, the set of the shoulders, the depth of the breath, the stillness under the skin, and at the end of the circle he stopped and inclined his head, which from Splinter was a thing a son could live on for a week. Do you understand what you did just now? He asked. Not the trick of it, the shape of it. I stayed quiet, Harry said, inside and out. You did more than that, you wove. Watch. Splinter held up one hand and folded down a finger for each thing. You used your eyes, which I gave you. You used your patience, which is mine and Leonardo's. You used your falling, which is Raphael's when you went low past the wire. You used your hands, which are Donatello's. And you used your power, which is yours alone, and you used it so softly that it served the silence instead of breaking it. 4 of you taught you 4 things, and you have made of them one thing, which is yourself, and which is no longer 4 things at all. He lowered the hand. That is the whole of what I have to teach, Harry. I have spent your whole life teaching it to you from the outside, one piece at a time. This morning you did it from the inside. There is a name for a student who can do that. What is it? Michelangelo asked, because Harry would not. There is no good word for it in this language, said Splinter. The closest is a word that means the river has learned its own course and no longer needs the banks. He set his hand on the crown of Harry's untidy head. You are 11 years old and you moved through my whole house unseen. I will tell you the truth, my son, because you have earned the truth. I do not know how much further I can take you in the thing that is yours alone. The stillness, the balance, the patience, all of that I can deepen in you for the rest of my life. But the power itself has rules I have never been taught. There may be somewhere in the world a teacher who knows those rules. His hand stayed where it was. If such a teacher ever comes for you, I want you to be the kind of student worth teaching. This morning you were. Remember it on the days you doubt. Donatello did not let the morning's test go. He never let anything go. Letting go was simply not a tool he had been issued. He cornered Harry in the workshop after the mats, a fresh page already half filled in his cramped, racing hand, and made him do it all again, slower, narrating. When you moved the rice, walk me through it. Did you picture where you wanted it, or did you just sort of generally want it gone, or was it more like a push? It's not a push. Harry sat on the workbench among the hanging half-built things and tried to find words for a thing that had never needed them. A push has a direction. It's more like this. You know when you reach for a cup without looking and your hand just knows where the cup is and it goes there. It's like that. I don't tell my hand the angle. I want the cup and the wanting already knows the angle. The rice was like that. I wanted bare floor where my foot was going and the wanting knew which grains. Donnie wrote it down at a speed that should not have been possible. Okay, so it's not force, it's not aim, it's intention with the geometry already baked in. That's insane. That's a completely different operating principle than anything physical. Do it again, move this. He set a bolt on the bench a foot from Harry's hand. But this time I want you to try to want it badly. Like strain, grab at it. Harry reached for the bolt with everything he had, as he had reached in the street the week before, fingers tight, wanting it the way a falling man wants the ledge. The bolt skittered, jumped, spun off the bench and pinged into the dark, and Harry's head went light and the candle's stillness drained out of him all at once, and he had to put a hand down on the bench to keep the room level. Whoa, hey. Sit. Donnie steadied his shoulder, peering at him with the bright, merciless focus he turned on a thing that had just told him something true. You went gray. Grabbing costs you. Look, write this down. This is the whole game. When you wanted the rice from inside the stillness, it was free, cost you nothing. You could have done it 100 times. When you grab at it from fear, it works, but it bleeds you. and it bleeds you fast, and 3 more of those and you'd have been on the floor of that grocery, instead of standing over a guy telling him the corner's bad luck. He sat back, turning the page so Harry could see the 2 columns he had drawn. It's the same thing Sensei's been telling you your whole life, except now I can prove it. Calm is your fuel. Panic is you burning the furniture to stay warm. The power isn't strongest when you need it most. It's strongest when you need it least, and you have to build the calm before the trouble, not during it, because during it the door is already shut. He looked almost offended by how neatly it fit. Your magic is a sensei. It only answers students who have already done the work. I hate how on brand that is for this family. Harry laughed and the room came back level, and he looked at the 2 columns in Donnie's cramped hand, free and stillness in one, costly and panic in the other, and understood that his brother had just handed him something he would need on a night neither of them could see yet. Don't tell Raph the panic one bleeds me, he said. He'll never let me up top again. Buddy, Raph figured out the panic one bleeds you about 4 years before I did, said Donnie, going back to his page. He just didn't have a chart. That's the only difference between me and Raph. I have charts. He was allowed on the surface now. He had earned it the slow way, by being uncatchable, and Splinter had kept his old promise and taken him up onto a rooftop on a clear night, and the 2 of them had watched the lights together until the sky went gray, and after that the surface had become part of Harry's world, in its proper season, under the old strict laws. He loved it the way you love a thing you waited years for. He was careful with it the way you are careful with a thing you nearly lost before you had it. Which was why the night with the girl and the car went the way it did. They were 4 rooftops north of home, the 5 of them, running the high country on an ordinary patrol, when the sound came up from the street, a sound none of them had a kata for, a young woman's voice, sharp with the particular fear that has decided shouting is the last card it has to play, and under it the low, ugly laughter of men who have done this before. Down in the canyon of the street, a girl no older than Leonardo was backed against a shuttered storefront by 3 men, and one of them had her bag, and one of them had her arm, and the third stood easy in the street as a lookout, and a car idled at the curb with its door open like a mouth. The brothers stopped on the parapet as one body. This was the hard law, the oldest one after the law of shadow, and they all knew it and they all hated it. You do not go down into the street. The street is the world's eye. You move people from the high country, you cut a power line, you drop a fire escape ladder, you throw your voice, you make a frightened stranger decide they imagined the green shape that saved them. But you do not stand in the lit street where 100 windows can see what you are, because the night the city learns there are turtles in its tunnels is the night the tunnels stop being safe for all of them forever. Leonardo was already mapping it the clean way, the cut the power and move the girl way, his hand coming up to send them around to the transformer on the corner. Harry did not wait for the hand. He went off the parapet. He went down the face of the building the way Raph had taught him, meeting each ledge and rolling the fall away, and he hit the alley mouth silent and came up out of the dark behind the lookout, and he did not strike him, because Splinter's house did not raise creatures who struck first. He reached past him with a thread of will, and the idling car's door swung shut with a bang like a shot, and every man in the street flinched and turned toward the noise, and in the half-second their eyes were on the car. Harry took the girl's wrist out of the grip that held it, not with his hand but with a pull of want that peeled the fingers loose, and he put his own body between her and the 3 of them and said, low and even, in a voice his brothers had never heard him use, "Run, now," left at the corner. Don't look back, she ran. She was the only one who did the smart thing that night. Because now Harry was standing in a lit street, 11 years old, 4 feet tall, with the dark unruly hair and the green eyes and the thin scar plain on his forehead, and 3 grown men were looking at him, and 100 windows were looking at the street, and the green shapes on the parapet 4 floors up went rigid with the wrongness of watching the one law that kept them all alive break in real time, in their own brothers' hands, for the best reason in the world. What happened next happened fast, and Harry did it well, which somehow made it worse. The 3 men came at him, and he did not run and he did not strike, he used the street. He wanted a loose manhole cover to turn under a running foot, and a man went down. He wanted the spilled trash to slick a second man's stride, and a man went down. The third got a hand on him, one big hand closing on the back of his neck, and Harry went still under it, candle still, and then he simply was not where the hand was. A twist Raph had drilled into him 10,000 times, and his own momentum carried him stumbling forward into the shuttered storefront with a crash that brought a light on in a window overhead, and a voice, and then more lights. A green shape dropped out of the dark and landed in the street beside Harry with a face like a coming storm. Gio, Raphael roared and grabbed his brother by the back of the neck, the same place the third had grabbed him, and threw him bodily at the alley, and the 5 of them went up and out and over and were gone into the high country before the first window had finished sliding open, leaving behind a confused street, 3 groaning men, an empty idling car, and a story that would be told and disbelieved for a week and then forgotten, because the city is large and forgets quickly, this once, this time. By the width of a hair, they did not stop for 10 rooftops. When they stopped, it was on the wide, flat roof of an old factory, and the moment Harry's feet touched it, Raphael spun him around by the shoulder. What was that? It was not a question. Raph's chest was heaving, and it was not from the run. What in the name of everything, what was that, Harry? They had her, Raph. They were putting her in a car. I wasn't going to stand on a roof and watch them put a girl in a, so you light yourself up in the middle of a street like a flare, with your face. With your face, Harry. You think nobody saw your face. You think 100 people didn't just see a kid do impossible things in the street with the lights on. That's it. That's the thing. That's the one thing. We move people from the dark. We have always moved people from the dark. You learned that before you learned to read. His voice cracked down the middle. You want to know why I threw you off that roof 6 years ago and held my hand over your mouth on a ledge over 9 floors? Because the second they see us, we're done. All of us. Not just you. Sensei is done. The lair is done. There is nowhere else, Harry. There is no other hole to crawl into. This is it. And you spent it. You spent all of it for one girl in one street. And she's alive, Harry said, and his voice was shaking too now, but it did not back down, and that was the new thing in it, the thing that had grown in him this last year, the thing that would one day frighten Dark Lords. She's alive and she's running home right now because I didn't do the smart thing. You were going to cut the power, Leo. You were going to be smart. And maybe it works, and maybe by the time the transformer blows she's in the car and gone, and we're up here being smart about an empty street. I'm not sorry, Raph. I broke the law, and I'm not sorry, and those are both true, and I don't know how to make them not both true. It was Leonardo's own argument, almost word for word, the one Leo himself had made in a dozen quiet talks about the cost of the laws, and Leo, standing off to the side, heard his own words come out of his youngest brother's mouth and had the grace to look at the gravel. But it was Raphael who answered, and Raphael did not answer with the law. Raphael answered with the thing under the law, which Harry had not understood yet and was about to. I'm not afraid of the cost to the lair. Raph's voice had gone low and rough and stripped down to the floor of him. I mean I am, but that's not. Harry, I'm afraid of the cost to you. You went down into that street and you put your body between a stranger and 3 men, and you did not have one thought in your head about getting hurt. Not one. I watched your face. You weren't being brave. Brave is when you're scared and you do it anyway. You weren't scared. You don't think it can happen to you, do you? You think the power catches you. You think the air closes around your hand every time. And one day it won't, and you'll be in a street you didn't have to be in, and I will not be fast enough, and I will spend the rest of my life on a ledge over 9 floors with my hand over a mouth that stopped breathing. That's what I'm afraid of, not the lair. You reckless, you. And the words ran out, because there was no word at the bottom of it but the one turtles like Raphael never say, and he turned away and put his hands on the parapet and gripped it and looked out at the city instead of at his brother, and his shoulders worked. The other 3 were very quiet. And Harry, who had stood his ground against the law and against the danger and against his own fear without giving an inch, found that he had no ground at all against this. He crossed the gravel and stood beside his brother at the parapet, not touching him, the 2 of them looking out at the lights, and he was quiet for a long time, and the wind came off the river. You taught me to fall, he said at last. You said nobody beats a fall. You said you make friends with it on the way down, you and the fall work it out together, and then you both get up and walk away. He put his hand on the cold parapet next to Raph's. I think I forgot the part where you have to actually fall first. I think I've been so sure the air would catch me that I stopped making friends with the ground. He let that sit. I'm sorry, not for the girl. I'd do the girl again. But I'm sorry I made you stand on the ledge. I didn't think about you being down there with me. I only thought about her. I'll think about you next time. I promise I'll think about you. Raphael's grip on the parapet eased. He did not look around. But after a moment his hand moved the 2 inches across the cold stone and closed over his brother's, blunt and rough and warm, and held it. Yeah, well, he said to the city, to the lights, to the river wind. You better. Splinter heard the whole of it, because they told him the whole of it, because that was the law above all the other laws. You do not carry a thing in the dark alone. He listened, and at the end he was quiet, and then he said a strange thing. You were both right, he told them. Raphael was right that the law is the law, and the cost is real, and a family that spends its safety on impulse will not have a family for long. And Harry was right that a law which lets a girl be carried into the dark, while we keep our hands clean, is a law with a rotten place in it, and a creature who obeys such a law without ever feeling the rot has lost something I would grieve to see him lose. Both true. They are both true at once, and you are old enough now to live inside two true things that pull against each other, because that, my sons, is the whole of being a grown creature in a hard world. The child wants one rule that is always right. The grown one learns to stand in the place where two rights cross and to choose and to carry the cost of the choosing and to choose again tomorrow. He looked at Harry. You chose well and you chose badly in the same breath. Next time, choose the girl and the dark both. Move her without the lights. It is harder. You are good enough now for harder. That is the only thing I will add to what your brother already taught you better than I could. That should have been the end of it. It was not, because 3 nights later, the thing that had been a rumor in the tunnels for a year stopped being a rumor. They were running the high country again. Careful now, all of them. The careful you only get by frightening yourself badly once. When they came across the back of a shop they knew, a corner grocery run by an old couple named Tran who had more than once left a stack of unsold bread by a certain grate for reasons they never let themselves examine too closely. The shop's back door stood open to the alley. Light spilled out of it wrong, the harsh swinging light of an overturned lamp. And from inside came the sound of a register being torn from its mount, and an old man's voice saying over and over, with the terrible patience of someone who has decided to be brave at the worst possible time, "Take it. Take the money. It is only money. Take it and go." There were 4 of them inside, young, hard, dressed alike, with a mark on their jackets the brothers knew, a coiling purple dragon. Mr. Tran was on the floor against the cooler with a hand to his face, and Mrs. Tran was behind the counter with a phone she had not been allowed to finish dialing, and the 4 with the dragons on their backs were not in a hurry, which was the worst sign of all, because men who are not in a hurry have decided no one is coming. On the roof, Leonardo's hand came up, and this time it moved differently, because this time the lesson had been learned all the way around. Move them from the dark, but move them. Donnie the light, Leo breathed. Harry the back. Raph Mikey, with me through the front the second it goes dark. Harry, and he looked at his youngest brother, and something passed between them that had not been possible a week before, a leader handing a real piece of the work to a soldier he trusted with it. Their feet, their hands, not their eyes. Keep us in the dark and put them on the floor and let them tell each other tomorrow that they tripped. Can you do that? Yes, said Harry. Donnie's hand found the alley's power junction and a knife of will in the dark, and the back of the shop went black, every light at once, and in the half-second of blindness that follows sudden dark, the 4 ninja came in from 2 directions, and the thing was done almost before it began. Harry worked the floor and the air. A dragon lunged for the door, and the door was somehow not where his shoulder expected it, and he met the frame instead. A second swung a length of pipe at the dark shape of Raphael, and the pipe turned to lead in his hand and dragged his arm down, and Raph took him gently off his feet. A third found his own jacket snagged on a shelf bracket that had not been there a breath ago, and hung there cursing while Mikey relieved him of the register. The fourth, the one who had hit the old man, made it 3 steps into the alley before the alley itself seemed to reach up and take his ankle, and he went down hard on the wet stone, and Harry crouched over him in the dark, unseen, a voice with no shape, and said very quietly, the way Splinter said things, "You will not come back here. You will tell your friends this corner is bad luck. You felt the bad luck tonight. There is more of it." And he let him scramble up and run, because Splinter's house did not raise creatures who hurt the helpless, and a man running blind from nothing he could see was punishment enough and warning besides. When the lights came back on, the shop held an old couple, a recovered register, a scatter of dropped weapons, and no one else at all. Mrs. Tran helped her husband up. They looked at the empty shop and at the back door swinging open on the dark alley, and the old man went to the door and looked out into the night a long while, and then he did a thing he had never done before. He set the day's last loaves on the back step, in plain sight, not by the grate, and he said into the dark, not loud, "Thank you," and went in and locked the door. Up on the parapet, 5 shadows did not answer, because the kindest thing you can give a grateful stranger is the chance to decide they imagined you. But Mikey took the bread on the way home, and that night they named the pizza they did not have after it anyway, in absentia, the Tran Triumph, and Harry, the keeper of the names, wrote it on the long list in his head and kept it, and it was, he thought, the best one yet. There was a name the brothers did not say in front of Harry, and Harry had known for nearly a year that there was a name they did not say, in the way the youngest in any house always knows the shape of the thing nobody will name. He had heard it leak once through a wall, in Raph's voice, low and hard, and he had heard Splinter shut the conversation with a single word, and he had not asked, because his father had taught him that some doors open when you stop pushing on them. It opened the night after the grocery, when Harry could not sleep and found his father awake at the shrine and sat down beside him, and Splinter looked at him a while and then decided he was grown enough. You have been waiting to ask me about the foot, the old rat said. I didn't know that was the name. I knew there was a name. It is the name. Splinter fed the candle and was quiet, going back along a road he did not walk often. In the life I had before this one, before the change, before the city above forgot me, I lived in another country and I served a man, and that man had an enemy, and the enemy was a clan of ninja who had turned the old honest art into a knife for hire. The foot. They take the discipline I have given you, the silence, the patience, the unseen step, and they sell it. They serve a master who wears steel and calls himself the Shredder, and he is, of all the creatures I have known in 2 lives, the one who understood the art best and honored it least. He took everything from the house I served. He is the reason I came to this country with nothing. He does not know I am here. He believes I am long dead, and I have spent 12 years making certain he keeps believing it, because the day he learns a rat who knows his methods is raising 5 ninja under his city is the day this family stops being safe in the only place we are safe. Harry took it in all the way down, as he took everything now. So there's 2 of them, he said slowly. 2 things that could come for us. The hidden people who lost a kid with a lightning scar, and the steel man who thinks you're dead. 2 shadows, Splinter agreed, gathering from 2 directions, and neither one yet knowing the other exists, and both of them in the end the same lesson. He turned to his son. Hear me, because this is the heart of it, and you are old enough for the heart. The Shredder and the people who will come for you are not opposites. They are the same mistake in 2 costumes. Both believe power is a thing you take and keep and point at others. Both have great skill and no balance, and a creature with great skill and no balance is a sword with no one holding the hilt, and it will cut whatever is nearest, and in the end it cuts the hand that forged it. That is why I have never feared, truly, for what you will become, no matter how strong the power in you grows. I have not been teaching you to be strong. The world is full of strong. I have been teaching you to be balanced, so that when you are strong, and you will be very strong, Harry, stronger than your brothers, stronger perhaps than me, there will be someone holding the hilt. He set his hand on the candle's warmth without touching the flame. The foot may come. The hidden people will come. Let them. They will find in this house the one thing neither of them has ever learned to fight, a strength that knows its own course and does not need to cut to feel its own edge. Now go to sleep. You will need the stillness more than you know, and sooner than I would wish. Harry went to sleep. But he kept the 2 shadows in his mind after that, side by side, the steel and the lightning, and he understood fully now that the careful life his father had built under the city had been built against a storm that had not arrived yet, and that some part of his whole upbringing had been, without his ever being told, a preparation. The first owl came 2 days after that. Harry saw it on a dawn climb, perched on a fire escape against the gray sky, a great tawny thing with round, unblinking eyes, and it looked at him, only at him, with an attention no city bird had ever spent on anybody, and when he came up onto the roof it did not startle and fly. It turned its head and watched him cross, and then it lifted off without hurry and was gone over the rooftops, and Harry stood where it had been and felt the small hairs lift along his arms the way his father's had lifted over a basket 11 years before, though he did not know that, and did not know why, only that something had looked at him on purpose and gone away to tell someone. The second owl came to the lair itself, which should not have been possible. It was at the eastern grate, behind 3 turnings and a locked maintenance hatch and 40 feet of the kind of dark that nothing winged should ever have crossed, and it sat on the bars with a square of cream-colored paper in its beak, and when Donatello approached it with all the caution of a scientist meeting, the impossible, it dropped the paper through the bars and flew back up the shaft into the morning, and was gone. Donnie brought the paper to the family with the look of a man carrying a live wire. It was an envelope, heavy, the color of old cream, sealed on the back with a blob of purple-red wax stamped with a crest, a lion, an eagle, a badger, a serpent, around a single ornate letter. And on the front, in green ink, in a looping old-fashioned hand, was an address that stopped the breath in the whole room, because it was not a street, and it was not a number, and it was not anywhere the post of the world above had any business knowing existed. Mr. H. Potter the Dojo, beneath the city, the 5th mat from the eastern shrine beneath New York. Nobody spoke. Donnie turned it over twice, as though the back might explain the front. Raphael's hand had drifted to where a sigh would be, and Harry took it from his brother's fingers, the heavy cream envelope with his name on it in green. His name, Potter, a name no one in the lair had ever spoken because no one in the lair had ever known it, and he looked at the small, fierce thing the candle had taught him to be, and he felt it stand up inside his chest the way the flame stood up, and he turned to the gray, whiskered face that had named him Harry in the first hour of his life. "Sensei," he said, and his voice did not shake, because his father had spent 11 years teaching it not to. "I think the teacher came." Potter, Michelangelo said, trying the word out, careful with it, as though it might be hot. Your name's got a back half, we never even. 11 years, dude, and you had a whole other name riding behind the first one the whole time. Harry Potter. Donnie said it like a result that had just closed an equation, quiet, almost reverent. It's a real name. Out there in the world above, that's somebody. That's a house behind it, a family, records, people who'd know your eyes. He looked stricken by his own thought. People who lost you. Harry ran his thumb over the green letters of the surname he had never been given and had carried unknowing since the storm. He thought of the cream paper on the high shelf behind Donnie's latched box, the woman's hard, fast hand, the one word she had been sure of. She had been sure of Harry. She had not written Potter. Either she had not known it or she had not dared. And now a different hand in green, behind a wax crest with 4 animals on it, knew both halves of him and exactly which mat he slept on, and had sent an owl through 40 feet of dark that nothing winged should cross to tell him so. Whoever wrote this, he said slowly, working it the way Donnie had taught him to work a broken machine, knows things nobody should know. They know my surname, which even Sensei didn't know. They know we're under the city. They know the shrine and the mats and which one is mine. He set the envelope down on the table, flat, deliberate, the way you set down a thing you have decided not to be afraid of. That's either the most dangerous thing that's ever come into this house, or it's the first time in my life somebody from out there has known exactly who I am and bothered to find me, and I can't tell which. They might both be true. Sensei says they can both be true. They are both true, said Splinter quietly. They almost always are. That is why we will not open it standing up, and we will not open it afraid, and we will not open it apart. Raphael had not said a word. He stood at Harry's shoulder with his arms folded, and the dragon knight still fresh in him, and a second, older knight fresher still, a ledge over 9 floors, a hand over a mouth, and he looked at the green ink that knew his brother's name and his brother's bed, and the thing in his face was not anger, though it wore anger's coat. He reached past Harry and turned the envelope a half-inch so the crest faced the shrine, the way you turn a stranger to face the host. Whoever they are, Raph said, they found the wrong sewer if they think they're walking out of here with him. Open it, Sensei. Let's find out who we're dealing with. Splinter looked at the green ink, and at the wax, and at the crest, and last and longest at his youngest son holding his own true name in his 2 steady hands, and the old rat was quiet for the space of 3 breaths, and then he set the kettle on the brazier, because some answers are too large to give standing up. Then we will read what the teacher has to say, he said, over tea. Sit, my sons, all of you. Whatever comes through that grate next, it comes to all 6 of us, and it will find us at our own table in our own house together. Sit. They sat, and the kettle began very slowly to sing. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, The Letter and the Lightning. The letter, when Splinter finally broke the wax, was not a threat. That was the first surprise, and it set the tone for all the surprises that came after. He read it aloud slowly over the tea, with 5 sons leaning in around the low table and the candle burning steady between them, and the words it contained were so ordinary and so strange together that for a while no one knew what to do with them. It said that Harry had been accepted to a school. A school of magic called Hogwarts in a country across the ocean, where children like him, children with the candle fire in their chests, were taught the rules of the thing Splinter had never been able to teach. It said that term began on the 1st of September. It listed the things he would need, in a tidy column, robes and a cauldron and a set of scales and a wand, as though a wand were a thing you simply bought, like a loaf of bread. It was signed by a deputy headmistress with a tight, precise name, Minerva McGonagall, and under her name was a line requesting, with the politeness of a closing door, that Mr. Potter send his owl with a reply by no later than the 31st of July. We don't have an owl, said Michelangelo after a silence. Is that going to be a problem? It feels like that's going to be a problem. It is the smallest of our problems, said Splinter. He set the letter down on the table and smoothed it flat and looked at it as he looked at a thing he meant to understand completely before he moved against it. Consider what this letter is and what it is not. It is not a demand. It does not say, give us the child. It does not say, the child belongs to us. It is an invitation, written by someone who believes she is offering a great gift and who has no idea at all what kind of house she is writing to. He tapped the column of supplies. It expects a family that knows what a wand is. It expects a mother and a father who will be relieved that someone has finally come to explain their strange child to them. It does not expect us. Whoever sent this does not know who found Harry, or where, or how. They know only that the school's magic has this year finally been able to find him. After 11 years, Donatello said, he had the look he got when a number bothered him. If they can find him now with an owl through 40 feet of locked dark, why couldn't they find him before? He's been doing magic since he was a baby. The candle, the cups, where were they for 11 years? That, said Splinter, is the right question, and I do not have the answer, and the not having of it is the most dangerous thing in this room. He looked around the table at his sons. Here is what I believe. I believe Harry is someone, out there, in a way the green ink has only hinted at. I believe a school does not send a deputy headmistress's signature to every child, and I believe that a world which lost him for 11 years and has found him at last will not be content with a letter and an owl. Someone will come, not to threat, to collect. They will come gently, and they will come certain, and they will believe with their whole hearts that they are rescuing Harry from us. He let that land. And we will not meet them as frightened creatures who hide. We have hidden from a careless world. We will not hide from a world that has come knocking with Harry's true name on its lips. We will meet it standing in our own home, and we will see what it is made of, and it will see what we are made of, and then Harry will choose. Not us, Harry. It is his name on the envelope. Raphael's hands were flat on the table, and his arms were corded. And if what they're made of is bad, if they come to take him and we say no and they don't take no, then they will learn, said Splinter, very mildly, that they have come to the one address in this city where no is a complete sentence. And he drank his tea, and the matter was, for the moment, closed. They came 9 days later, and they came the way Splinter had said they would, certain and unhidden, and the family knew they were coming a full hour before they arrived, because two strangers walking the maintenance tunnels under the city make a great deal of noise to ears that have spent a lifetime in the quiet. Donatello tracked them on the old junction box he had wired into the tunnel sensors. 2 of them, east access, coming slow. One's small and quick and stops a lot, like she's reading the walls. The other one's okay, the other one is enormous. I'm getting his footfalls 3 sensors early. He's the size of a refrigerator, possibly 2 refrigerators. He looked up. They're not sneaking, they've got a light. They want us to know they're coming. Good manners, said Splinter, rising. We will return them. He looked at his sons, and the look settled them into the shape he wanted. Not hidden, not hostile, present. Leonardo beside me. Raphael, the shadow by the east arch, and you will stay in it unless I call you, and you will not call yourself. Donatello, Michelangelo, the high gallery, eyes only. Harry. He set his hand on his youngest son's shoulder. With me at the table, they have come for you. They will not find you behind us. They will find you at the center of your own home, with your family around you, where you have always been. Sit. Pour the tea, 5 cups for us, 2 for them. We meet them as hosts. Whatever else happens, we are the hosts, and they are guests in the house of Splinter, and that is a thing they will feel before they understand it. So it was that when Minerva McGonagall stepped at last out of the tunnel and into the lantern light of the lair, having walked further underground than she had ever walked in her life, having followed a tracking charm that insisted, against all reason, that the lost child of the Potters had spent 11 years beneath a foreign city, she came into a warm vaulted room hung with candles, with a worn mat at its center and a low table set for tea, and at the table composed unafraid. With green eyes and a thin scar, and a stillness no child his age had any business possessing, sat the thing she had crossed an ocean to find. Behind her, ducking very low under the arch, came a giant. Hagrid filled the tunnel mouth and most of the room, and his black eyes went around the lantern-lit space, and the candles and the green-shelled shapes in the high gallery and the great gray rat standing calm beside a turtle in a blue mask, and his enormous face worked through several expressions at speed and arrived at last on a kind of wet, astonished wonder. "Blimey," said Hagrid in a whisper that shook dust from the ceiling. Professor, look at him. He's got Lily's eyes." Minerva McGonagall did not answer at once. She was looking at Harry, and Harry was looking back at her with a level green attention that did not waver, and something in her tight, composed face had come loose at the edges. When she spoke, her voice was very controlled, which was how Harry would learn, over the years, that this woman held the things she could not afford to drop. "Mr. Potter," she said, "my name is Professor McGonagall. I have come a very long way to find you, and I confess I did not expect to find you here, of all the places in the world." Her eyes went around the room, taking in the candles, the shrine, the high gallery, the giant rat, and came back to Harry. "I am going to be honest with you, because I suspect you are a young man who can tell when he is being managed, and I will not insult you by trying. I have spent 11 years believing you were safe and ordinary in a perfectly mundane house. I was wrong about the house. I am beginning to suspect I was wrong about a great many things, so I will ask rather than assume. Are you well? Are you cared for in this place?" And Harry, 11 years old, the keeper of the names, the uncatchable, the river that had learned its own course, looked at the woman who had crossed an ocean to ask him that question, and he understood that she had asked the right one, and he answered it with his whole heart. "I'm the most cared-for person you've ever met," he said. "My father pulled me out of a flood when I was a baby. My brothers taught me everything I know. I've never gone a day hungry or a night cold or an hour without somebody who'd walk into fire for me. So yes, Professor, I'm well. I'm well in a way I don't think most kids ever get to be." He gestured with a host's open hand at the cups. "Will you sit? The tea's good, Leo made it, and you've come a long way, and my father says we meet people standing, but we feed them sitting down." There was a silence in the lair. Then Minerva McGonagall, deputy headmistress of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, who had faced down dark wizards and worse staff meetings, sat down at a low table in a sewer across an ocean from home, and took the tea a turtle poured her, and had to look for a moment very hard at the candle before she trusted herself to speak again. "Thank you," she said. "It is very good tea." They talked for a long time, and the talk went carefully, and somewhere in the middle of it Splinter sat down across from McGonagall, and the two of them took each other's measure in the way that two people who have each spent a lifetime keeping children alive will do, and arrived, without a word about it, at a wary mutual respect. It was McGonagall, in the end, who told Harry his history, because Splinter asked her to. "He has a right to it," the old rat said, "and you have the truth of it, which I do not. I have given him 11 years. I will not also try to give him a past I was not there for. Tell him, we will all of us hear it together. He should not have to carry it alone, and in this house no one does." So she told him. She told him about a man named James Potter and a woman named Lily, who had been brave and clever and very young, and who had loved each other and loved him. She told him there had been a war in the hidden world, a war against a wizard so terrible that most people would not say his name, a wizard who killed for an idea about who deserved magic and who did not. She told him that this wizard had come for Harry's family on a night near Halloween, 11 years ago, when Harry was a baby, because of a prophecy, because he had decided that a child might one day undo him. She told him that James had died first, in the doorway, buying seconds. That Lily had died in front of Harry's crib, refusing to step aside, given the chance to live and refusing it, dying with her arms out over her son. And she told him that when the terrible wizard turned his killing curse on the baby in the crib, it had not worked. That it had broken on him somehow and rebounded, and torn the dark wizard out of his body and flung whatever was left of him into the dark, and left behind a destroyed house, 2 dead parents, and a baby with a lightning scar on his forehead, alive, the only living thing in all the world ever to survive that curse. "They call you the boy who lived," McGonagall said quietly. "Out there in our world, you are not a child anyone has forgotten. You are a story they tell at bedtime. There are people alive today who toast your name and have no idea you have spent your childhood in a kitchen under New York." She looked at Splinter. "I came here braced to rescue a neglected child. I find instead that the safest place the boy who lived could possibly have spent his childhood was the one place in all the world that no wizard ever thought to look. I do not understand how you came to him, but I have eyes, sir, and I see what you have made of him, and I will not pretend otherwise to anyone who asks me." Harry had gone very still through all of it. He sat at the center of his family in the candlelight, and learned, in the space of a quarter of an hour, that he had been made by a death he could not remember, that a woman had stood over his crib with her arms out and chosen to die rather than move, that the mark on his forehead, the mark his father Splinter had told him did not get a vote in who he became, had been bought with his mother's life. He did not weep, though no one in that room would have thought less of him if he had. He sat with it and breathed the candle breath, the still pond breath, and let the enormous cold fact of it settle through him to the bottom, the way Raph had taught him to let a fall settle, and when he finally spoke his voice was steady, because 11 years of patient hands had built it to be steady, even for this. "Her name was Lily," he said. "Yes, and she died with her arms out, over me, when she could have stepped aside and lived." "Yes," said McGonagall, "she could have, she was offered it." "She refused." Harry looked down at his own 2 hands on the table. Then he looked up, and he looked first at Splinter, his father, who had pulled him out of one flood and taught him to stand in every flood since, and something passed between them that did not need translating. "2 of them," Harry said softly. "2 people decided I was worth dying for before I could even talk, my mother, and the woman who carried me to the storm." He turned his hand over. "Sensei told me once that a stranger decided I was worth her life. He said the world has both kinds in it, and on the night I needed one, I got one. I didn't know I'd had 2. His voice did not break, but it went down to almost nothing, and Mikey, up in the high gallery, came down the wall without a sound and folded onto the floor beside his youngest brother, close shoulder to shoulder. "I'm going to be worth it," Harry said, to the table, to the candle, to the 2 dead women and the 5 living family members and the cold, enormous fact at the bottom of him. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to be worth what they spent. Splinter reached across the low table and set his hand over his son's. You have been worth it every day of your life, he said. Being worth it is not a debt you pay at the end. It is a thing you are in the small hours, in the patience, in the choosing. You have been paying it since before you could walk, and you never once knew there was an account. That is what makes you worth it. Now, he pressed Harry's hand and let it go. You have learned a great and terrible thing about where you came from. You will carry it the rest of your life, and we will carry it with you, all of us, always. But there is a question still on the table, and it is yours to answer, and only yours. The question was the school. McGonagall laid it out plainly, because she had learned, in 1 hour in that lair, that plain dealing was the only currency that's spent there. Harry was a wizard. The power in him was real and large and growing. An untrained magic in a strong young wizard did not stay quiet forever. It grew wild, and wild magic was dangerous to him and to everyone near him. Hogwarts existed to teach exactly the rules that Splinter had spent 11 years admitting he could not teach. If Harry came, he would learn to command the thing that had only ever so far commanded him. And if he comes, Raphael said from the shadow by the east arch, speaking for the first time, his voice flat and hard, what happens to him out there? You said it yourself, lady. Out there he's a story. A famous dead kid who turned out not to be dead. You want to take an 11-year-old who spent his whole life learning to not be seen, and you want to drop him into a school where everybody already knows his name before he walks in the door. You want to put him on a stage. And the thing that killed his parents, you said it got flung into the dark. You didn't say it died. Did it die? McGonagall was quiet a moment too long. We do not know, she admitted. Most believe he is gone. Some of us are less certain. He was not the kind of wizard who dies cleanly. So that's a no, said Raph. That's a no, he didn't die, and you want to send Harry right back into the middle of the world that thing wants to rule. Sensei, tell her. Tell her he's staying. He's 11. He doesn't have to walk into anything. And every eye in the lair went to Splinter, who had been silent through the whole of it, and who now rose and walked once around the table slow, and came to rest behind Harry's seat with both hands on his youngest son's shoulders, and spoke not to McGonagall and not to Raphael but to the top of Harry's dark, untidy head. When I found you, he said, you were a seed in a flood. I planted you in the deepest, safest dark I had, and I gave you good water and patient light, and you grew. But a tree planted in a cellar grows pale and thin, reaching always for a sun it is never allowed to find. I did not pull you out of one flood to keep you in a cellar your whole life, Harry. A tree must be allowed to know its own roots, and to stand in its own weather, and to find out how tall it was always meant to be. You have roots now in 2 worlds. You did not ask for the second one. But it is yours by blood, by that mark, by your mother's arms, and a creature does not become whole by pretending half of himself away. His hands tightened. I am not afraid to send you into danger. I have been preparing you for danger since the morning of the candle, though I prayed it would never come. I am afraid only of one thing, and it is not the dark wizard, and it is not the famous name, and it is not the stage. I am afraid that if I keep you safe in this cellar out of love, I will have done to you the one thing I swore that first night I would never do. I will have made your fear of the world larger than your hunger for it, and that is a smaller life than you were born for. He bent and spoke close to Harry's ear, so that it was almost only for him. You wanted the sky once, so badly you climbed a shaft alone in the dark to see it. I told you the sky would wait until you were ready to take it without losing everything else. You are ready. This is the sky, my son. Go and take it. And come home to us at the holidays and tell us everything, because we will be here, exactly here, the whole time, and this door does not close, not ever, not for any name or any war. You are not leaving us. You are going to school. There is a difference, and you will feel it every time you come home. Harry reached up and put his hand over his father's hand on his shoulder. All right, he said. I'll go. He looked at McGonagall. On 3 conditions, and they're not negotiable, and my father taught me that no is a complete sentence, so I mean them. 1. I come home every holiday, every single one, and nobody at that school gets to tell me my family is too strange to come home to. 2. Nobody out there finds out where I live or who raised me. Not the school, not the famous name people, not anybody. My family kept me secret for 11 years, and I'm not the one who breaks that. 3. And here his voice changed, and the green eyes came up, and for a moment the room saw the thing Splinter had built, the river that knew its course. 3. You teach me the rules. You said the power grows wild if it's not trained. Fine, train it. But I already know how to hold it still. I've known since I was 3, so don't teach me to be careful with it. Teach me what it can really do. Because if the thing that killed my parents is still out there in the dark, I am not going to meet it as a careful boy who almost knows magic. Do we understand each other?" Minerva McGonagall looked at the 11-year-old across the table for a long moment, and something in her composed face shifted toward a thing that was almost pride and almost fear and entirely respect. "Mr. Potter," she said, "I believe we understand each other perfectly. The conditions are accepted." She allowed herself the ghost of an expression. "I will say only this. In 40 years of teaching, I have met exactly one student who frightened me with his composure on the day I met him. You are the second. The first did not turn out well. You, I think, will turn out very differently, and I find I am rather looking forward to watching it happen." Diagon Alley, 3 weeks later, undid Harry in a way that the cold fact of his parents had not, because grief is a thing the patient can hold, but wonder ambushes you. He came up into it through a brick wall behind a pub, with McGonagall at his side and the great grey hood of a traveling cloak pulled up over the scar, and the alley opened in front of him in a crooked golden riot, shops leaning over a cobbled street, cauldrons stacked in towers, an apothecary breathing green smoke, owls and brooms in the windows, and over all of it a hum of 1,000 people doing openly the impossible things his family had spent a lifetime hiding. He stood at the mouth of it, and his trained stillness held on the outside, but McGonagall, who was watching him closely, saw the green eyes go wide and wider, and saw the child under the discipline look at a world that had been his birthright and his secret all at once, and she said nothing and let him have it. They went to a white marble bank run by goblins, and a cart ran them down into the earth, into tunnels that reminded Harry comfortingly of home, and a small door opened on his vault, and inside it were more gold coins than he had imagined existed, left to him by the parents he could not remember. He stood and looked at it a long while. Then he took only a modest handful, enough for his list and no more, and McGonagall raised an eyebrow. "It is all yours, Mr. Potter. You may take what you like." "I know." Harry weighed the small handful. "But my family walks 2 hours through tunnels to buy milk, and I'm not going to come up out of a flood into a pile of gold and forget that. I'll take what I need. The rest can wait until I know what it's for. Sensei says you should never pick up more than you've decided to carry." He was talking about pipes, but it works for gold. And then there was the wand. The shop was narrow and dim and smelled of dust and old wood, and a man with pale searching eyes came out of the shadows between the shelves and looked at Harry the way no one had ever looked at him, the way you look at a problem you have waited a long time to be handed. "I wondered," said Mr. Ollivander softly, "when I would see you. You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 10¼ inches, swishy willow, a good wand for charm work." His eyes went to the scar, just visible under the hood, and his voice dropped. "And your father favored a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable. A little more power and excellent for transfiguration. Well, I say your father favored it, but it is really the wand that chooses the wizard, of course. They tried wands for the better part of an hour." Ollivander would hand Harry a wand and Harry would hold it, and where another child might wave it hopefully, Harry went still, candle still, and listened to it as he listened to a room, and one after another the wand stayed silent in his steady hand, and Ollivander grew with each silence not more frustrated but more delighted, muttering, No, a difficult customer, I do like a difficult customer, piling boxes higher. "I wonder," he said at last very quietly, and went deep into the back of the shop and came out with a single dusty box, and opened it with the care of a man handling the last leaf of a tree. "Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple, an unusual combination. Try it, go on." Harry took it. He did not wave it. He held it in his steady hand and went into the stillness, the deepest pool of it, the place his father had spent 11 years teaching him to find, and he did not reach for the wand and he did not grab at it. He simply let it know he was there, calm, on a still pond, on a day he had chosen. And the wand, in the hand of a wizard who had been taught balance before he was ever taught power, did not throw sparks or knock over boxes, or do any of the violent young things wands do for ordinary children. It warmed. A single clean note of warmth ran up Harry's arm and into his chest and met the candle fire there and recognized it, 2 flames learning they were the same fire, and a soft, steady glow spread out from the wand's tip and filled the dim shop with a light like a held breath, and held and did not flicker. Ollivander stared at the steady, unwavering light. "Curious," he whispered. "Curious, curious. I have sold wands a very long time, Mr. Potter, and I have never seen that wand do that. They flare, they always flare. Yours did not flare, yours steadied." His pale eyes searched Harry's calm face. "Wherever you have been these 11 years, and whatever was done with you there, someone taught you a stillness I have not seen in a wizard in 100 years. He hesitated, then said the thing he had clearly debated saying. I think it only right you should know. The phoenix whose tail feather lives in your wand gave just one other feather, one other wand. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, why, its brother gave you that scar. The shop went quiet. Harry looked at the steady light filling the dim room, the light his own stillness had called up out of the brother wand of the thing that killed his parents, and he did not let the light flicker, and that, more than anything, was the moment Mr. Ollivander would remember for the rest of his life. That the Potter child stood in his shop holding the brother wand of the Dark Lord, and was told so, and the light in his hand did not so much as tremble. Then we'll see, Harry said quietly, which brother holds steadier. They parted at the threshold of the hidden world, where the brick wall waited to fold Harry back down toward the tunnels and home for one last month before September. McGonagall stopped him there with a hand on his shoulder, and she was, for the only time Harry ever saw, almost at a loss for what to say. I will be watching out for you, she managed. At the school, whatever you may have heard, you will not be alone there. You have a head of house who will already, I suspect, be far too fond of you, which is most unprofessional of me, and I find I do not care. Your family, your father. He is the most remarkable guardian I have encountered in a long and crowded career, and I have encountered some remarkable ones. Tell him I said so. He knows, said Harry, but I'll tell him anyway. He likes to hear true things said out loud. He says a true thing spoken over someone is a thing the world hears. He looked back once at the golden crooked alley that was, against all the odds of his strange life, his professor. A lot of people are going to spend the next year trying to make me into the boy who lived, and I'm going to let them think they're succeeding, because my father taught me that you let people see what they need to see. But I want one person out there to know the true thing. I'm not the boy who lived. That child died in a crib 11 years ago and his mother died over him. I'm Harry, Splinter's son, brother of 4, keeper of the names. The rest is just a name on an envelope. He pulled the hood up over the scar. Don't let them forget to teach me what the magic can really do. I meant that condition most of all. And he stepped through the wall and went down into the dark, toward home, toward one last month of mats and tea and pizza, and his father's hand on the crown of his head, carrying his mother's eyes and his father's steadiness, and a wand that had recognized the fire a rat had taught him to hold still. And behind him Minerva McGonagall stood alone in the alley a moment longer, and then went to write the strangest and truest letter of her career, and did not, in the end, find the words. And sent instead only a single line that the headmaster read 3 times. He is well, he is loved. And we, I think, are going to have to be very careful, because someone has raised us a wizard who is not afraid. The last month at home was the best and the strangest of Harry's life, and the family spent it the only way the family knew how to spend anything precious, which was together, and on purpose, with rituals. They trained every dawn. They did not train harder than usual, which Harry had half expected. They trained exactly as usual, because Splinter had decided that the gift he would give his departing son was not some final desperate cramming of skill, but the proof that the ordinary mornings would still be there, unchanged, when he came home. The cotter at dawn, the candle, the tea. The shape of the days that had made him, kept steady on purpose, so that Harry would carry the rhythm of them north and find it again at every holiday, a tide that did not change no matter how far the moon traveled. His brothers gave him things. Donatello had spent 3 weeks in the workshop with the door shut, and what he brought out on the last night was a pair of flat round mirrors, each the size of a palm, set in salvaged brass. I can't do magic, he said, turning them over in his clever hands, almost shy about it, which he never was. Believe me, I tried. I ran every test I have. The magic doesn't answer to me, it answers to you, and you'll be 1,000 miles away, so. He swallowed whatever was in his throat and went on. So I built them as good as I could build them, 2 halves of one thing matched, balanced, and I'm betting that out there, at that school, there's somebody who knows the spell to wake them up. A linking charm, a 2-way glass. You take one, I keep one, and the day you learn the charm, you point it at this mirror, and you'll see my ugly face, and I'll see yours, and the 1,000 miles won't mean anything. He pressed one into Harry's hand and closed Harry's fingers over it. Learn the charm first. Before the dueling, before the flying, before whatever they teach you. Learn the one that lets you call home. Promise me. I promise, said Harry, and kept the mirror against his ribs next to the wand, 2 halves of 2 worlds riding over his heart. Raphael gave him a strip of worn red cloth, cut from a band he had outgrown years before and kept anyway, and he did not make a speech, because Raph did not make speeches. He made gestures and let them stand for the speeches he could not get out. Tie it somewhere they can't see it, he said gruffly, under the fancy robes. So when some rich kid out there is telling you who you are, you can put your hand on it and remember who you actually are. He cuffed Harry once on the shoulder, gentle, which from Raph was an embrace. And if anybody puts a hand on you, you remember the falling. You and the ground work it out together. You don't need me there. You've never needed me there. I just always wanted to be there. That's the whole problem with me, kid. You figured that out years ago. Leonardo gave him a single smooth river stone, gray and worn round, and he set it in Harry's palm without a word at first. And then he said, "Be the stone." When the river's loud out there, when everyone's shouting your name and pulling you 6 directions, you put your thumb on this and you be the stone. The river moves, you don't. Sensei taught us that before we could talk. You're going to be the only one out there who knows it. Don't lose it because they don't. And Michelangelo gave him the list. He had written it out, the whole list, every pizza they had ever named, in his round, careful hand on a long scroll of butcher paper, all of them. 11 years of joy set down in ink, so that the keeper of the names would never be without his keeping. "I know you've got 'em all up here," Mikey said, tapping his own head, his voice not quite steady and not trying to be. "But up there it's gonna be all serious all the time. Wars and dead parents and dark wizards and homework. So when it gets too heavy, you take out the list and you read the names and you remember that down here, no matter what, there's a guy who thinks the most important job in the whole family is keeping track of the funny pizza names. And he gave that job to you. Because you're the best at it, don't you dare give it back." They escorted him to the edge of the world before dawn on the 1st of September. McGonagall had arranged the crossing, a thing called a portkey that would carry Harry across the ocean in a single wrenching instant to a hidden platform in London. And the rendezvous was a quiet surface access in a dead industrial yard where the family could come up out of the tunnels under the cover of the last dark and not be seen. They went together, all 6 of them, through the tunnels Harry had crossed unseen 1,000 times, and at the foot of the last ladder they stopped, because this was as far as the dark went, and beyond it was the gray beginning of a sky. Splinter took his youngest son by both shoulders and looked at him a long moment in the lantern light, and then he did the thing he had done in the first hour of Harry's life, and 10,000 times since, the thing that meant more than any word. He set his hand on the crown of the dark, untidy head, and let it rest there, warm, and Harry leaned up into the weight of it as he had leaned up into it when he was 3 days into the family and could not yet hold his own head, and the whole of his childhood was in that lane. "Go and learn what we could not teach you," Splinter said. "Hold the power still the way I taught you, and let them teach you what it can do, the way they promised. Make friends. A wizard who is not alone is a wizard no darkness can finish. You have been that wizard your whole life, and you do not yet know how rare it makes you. So go out and find the ones who will stand beside you, and let them, because the standing beside is the strongest magic there is, and no school will ever put it on a list." His hand pressed once and stayed. "And when the term ends, you come home. Down the ladder, through the dark, to the candle and the tea and the mats. We will be exactly here." "This door does not close. Say it back to me." "This door does not close," said Harry. "It does not close." Now Splinter took his hand away, and the cold of the morning came into the place where it had been, and that was how Harry knew it was time. "The sky is waiting, my son. It has waited an eternity for you. Do not keep it any longer. Go and be worth what they spent. You already are. Go and find it out for yourself." Harry held each of his brothers once, hard, in the gray light, and took up the battered tin can McGonagall had charmed for the crossing. And at the appointed second, the world hooked him behind the navel and tore him up and away from the only home he had ever known. And the dark and the lantern and the 5 shapes he loved beyond any naming were gone in a roar of color. And when the world set him down again, he was standing on a crowded London platform under a great iron arch. Beside a scarlet steam engine, in the middle of a river of wizards, alone. He put his thumb on Leo's stone. He put his hand on Raph's cloth under his robes. He felt Donnie's mirror and his mother's wand over his heart, and Mikey's list of names rolled safe in his trunk. He breathed the candle breath, the still pond breath, on a day he had chosen, and the river of strangers flowed around the still point he made, and not one of them knew that the quiet, green-eyed child standing so calm in the chaos had been raised in a sewer by a rat who loved him, and had come up out of the dark to take the sky. Harry Potter found an empty compartment and sat by the window and watched the scarlet engine pull north through a country he had never seen, toward a castle full of magic and a name he meant to wear like a borrowed coat, and he was not afraid, because he had never once in his life been alone, and he was not alone now. He carried all of them with him. He always would. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. 2 worlds, one spine. The Sorting Hat had been sorting children for 1,000 years, and in all that time, it had never once been asked to sit on a head so quiet. It dropped over Harry's eyes in the great candle-lit hall, with 4 long tables of students watching and the ghost of his own pulse the only loud thing in him, and the old voice woke up inside his skull and went still, the way a hand goes still when it finds something it did not expect to touch. "Well," said the hat after a moment. Well, this is new. I have looked into a great many heads, Mr. Potter, and they are all of them noisy. Ambition shouting over fear, shouting over want. Yours is the first I have ever entered that was already sitting down. It rummaged, delicately. Someone built you a room in here. A quiet room with a candle in it, and you go and sit in it when the world gets loud. Who taught you that? My father, Harry thought, without meaning to, and the image came with it, unbidden, a gray whiskered face and a hand on the crown of his head. Ah, said the hat softly, not the father they'll write about, the one who taught you the quiet room, I see him. It was respectful, suddenly, the way the wise are respectful of the wise. You have courage enough for Gryffindor, more than enough, though it is a strange still courage, and they will not know what to make of it. You have a mind that would do very well in Ravenclaw, for you take a thing apart before you trust it. And there is a cunning in you, oh yes, a cunning that knows when not to be seen, that Slytherin would sharpen to a terrible edge. Any of the 3 would have you gladly. The hat hesitated, but you did not come here to be sharpened. You came here whole already, raised whole, and what you need is not a house to make you into something. What you need is a house full of people to stand beside, because that is where your strength has always lived. You know this. You have known it since before you could speak. Then put me where the standing beside is best, Harry thought. Gryffindor, the hat bellowed to the hall, and added just for Harry, under the roar of the red-and-gold table, a last private word. Be the still one in the loud house, Mr. Potter. They will need it before the year is out. And so, I think, will you. Harry took the hat off and walked to the cheering table and sat down among the strangers who were already, by some old castle magic, his housemates, and he breathed the candle breath and let the noise wash over the still point he made, and across the table a red-haired first-year with a smudge on his nose stuck out a hand and said, Ron Weasley. Blimey, you're really him, aren't you? You're really. Sorry, you probably get that all the. Anyway, Ron, and a girl with a great deal of brown hair and a great deal of opinion, already 3 sentences into a description of Hogwarts. A history that no one had requested, paused long enough to add, Hermione Granger, and look at Harry with the frank assessing stare of someone who has decided to find out whether a famous person is worth the fame. Harry, said Harry, and shook the hand, and met the stare, and did not perform the famous name for either of them, and that, though none of the 3 of them knew it yet, was the beginning of the thing that would carry all of them through everything that came after. He did not fit, and he made no effort to, and somehow that was exactly how he won them. The other first-years arrived at Hogwarts loud with what they were, pure-blood children who had grown up knowing every spell by its grandmother's name, muggle-born children dizzy with the newness of it, all of them 11 and frightened, and covering the fright with chatter. Harry arrived quiet. He woke before the dormitory in the gray hour, and ran the cotta Leonardo had given him, alone, between the 4-poster beds, slow, exact, until the movements stopped being movements, and Ron, waking once to find his roommate flowing through some silent foreign dance in the half-light, watched a while and then said only, That's wicked, mate, and went back to sleep, and never told anyone, and that was the day Harry decided he liked Ron Weasley. The discipline showed in small ways that the castle slowly learned to read. Harry never ran in the corridors, and was never late, because he had been taught that hurry is a kind of falling. He sat in lectures with a stillness that unnerved the professors used to fidgeting. He watched their hands when they cast, the way his father had taught him to watch a thing being done before trying it, and so his wand work, when it came clean and economical, and without the flailing of the others. Professor Flitwick squeaked with delight over a levitation charm performed without one wasted motion. Professor McGonagall, who knew exactly where the stillness had come from and had promised herself she would not show favor, showed favor, and was privately glad of it. And then there was Draco Malfoy, who had arrived at school with a sneer fully formed and a talent for finding the soft place in a person and pressing on it, and who tried in the 2nd week to find Harry's. He found nothing to press on. That was the thing that undid him. He cornered Harry after a potions lesson with 2 large silent friends behind him, and a remark prepared about how the famous Potter had clearly been raised by nobodies, because he didn't carry himself like quality, and Harry listened to the whole of it with the patient attention of a creature who had spent his life watching for the moment a thing became dangerous, and when Malfoy ran out of words and waited for the famous temper to flare, it did not flare. Harry simply looked at him, calm, green-eyed, entirely unbothered, and said, You worked hard on that, you wanted it to land. It didn't, and now you don't know what to do, because the whole plan was that it would land. He gathered his books without hurry. I was raised by people who love me. You can't reach the part of me you're aiming at. It isn't there. Try the others. Some of them haven't been taught yet that you can only hurt someone who's decided your opinion counts. And he walked off down the dungeon corridor, unhurried, leaving Malfoy standing in the wreckage of an insult that had hit nothing, and the story of it went around the school by supper, because there is nothing students love so much as a bully who swings and misses. Severus Snape was a harder problem, because Snape was not a bully but a wound that had learned to bite, and he looked at Harry with a loathing that had nothing to do with Harry, and everything to do with a face Harry had inherited, and a woman Harry had never met. Harry felt the unfairness of it and did not rise to it, which made Snape loathe him more, because Snape had wanted James Potter's arrogance to flare in the sun so he could punish it, and got instead a still green-eyed patience that was unmistakably the mother's, and could not be punished without punishing her memory. And so the two of them settled into a cold standoff that Harry, with the strange wisdom his father had built into him, understood better than Snape did. "He's not angry at me," Harry told Hermione once after a particularly vicious class. "He's angry at somebody I look like, and somebody I'm related to, and they're not here, so I get the bill. My father says you should never take a debt that isn't yours. I just wish I knew how to give this one back to whoever actually owes it." The teacher who frightened him, though, was the nervous one. Professor Quirrell, who taught defense in a turban and a stammer, set Harry's instincts ringing the first time they were in a room together, and Harry could not have said why. It was nothing Quirrell did. It was something underneath what Quirrell did, a wrongness, a cold place in the room that the stammering, nervous surface did not account for, the way a still pond tells you there is something heavy on the bottom by the way it refuses to ripple. Harry's scar ached, faintly, the first time Quirrell's eyes passed over him at the welcoming feast, a thin old pain he had carried so long he had stopped noticing it, woken now for no reason he could name. He told no one at first, but he watched Quirrell after that the way Raphael had taught him to watch a doorway, and he waited, because his father had taught him that the patient see the shape of a thing long before the hasty do. He learned the mirror charm in October, and it was Hermione who cracked it, because of course it was. He had shown her the two flat brass mirrors on a wet afternoon in the library, told her only that his brother had made them, and bet that there was a spell to wake them up, and Hermione Granger had taken one look at a genuine unsolved problem, and forgotten entirely that she had been annoyed with him about something. They spent 3 weekends on it. It was a linking charm in the end, a cousin of the protean charm that was years above their level, and they should not have been able to do it, and they did it anyway, because Hermione was the cleverest witch of her age and Harry could hold a working still in his mind the way other children could not, and between the two of them the impossible thing simply got done. The night it worked, Harry sat alone in a window alcove after curfew, against every rule, and he warmed the mirror in his hand with the candle breath, as he warmed everything now, and he wanted, gently, to see home. The glass clouded and cleared, and there was Donatello's face, lit blue by some workshop lamp 1,000 miles and an ocean away, leaning in close with his eyes going enormous, and behind him a scramble and a crash as the others heard him shout and came running, and then the little mirror was full of green faces fighting for room in the frame, 4 of them and a 5th gray-whiskered one moving up calm behind, and the whole warm, loud, impossible lair was there in his palm in the cold castle dark. "It works," Donnie was yelling. "It works, I told you, I told all of you, point it at me, point it right at. Harry, can you see me? Say something, say a real thing, prove it's you and not the sorrowful pepperoni," said Harry very quietly into the mirror in the dark of the alcove with his eyes stinging. "The midnight avalanche, the one we do not speak of, which had olives. It's me, Donnie, I'm the keeper of the names, it's me." There was a silence in the little glass, and then Michelangelo's voice cracked clean down the middle and said, "He kept the names." Of course he kept the names, and Splinter's face moved into the frame, calm and old and lit blue, and looked at his youngest son across an ocean for the first time in 2 months, and said only, "There you are, we have been keeping your place at the mats. The candle is lit, tell me everything." And Harry, in a window alcove in a Scottish castle, 1,000 miles from the only home he had ever known, told his family everything, and was, for the length of that telling, not anywhere near alone. After that he called home twice a week in the alcove after curfew, breaking the school's rules to keep his father's, and it was the rule he never once broke. Flying came to him the way water comes to a slope. The first flying lesson was a disaster for nearly everyone. Broomsticks bucking and rolling, children shrieking, one boy already breaking his wrist within the first 10 minutes, and Harry stepped up to a battered school broom and put his hand over it, and it leapt into his palm at once, the way the cup had leapt to his hand when he was 3, because flying turned out to be nothing but balance and stillness, and a refusal to fight the thing under you. And Harry had been doing that since before he could read. He went up and the wind took him, the real wind, the high cold wind he had loved since a rooftop when he was 6. And he did not grip the broom, and he did not lean, and he did not panic. He sat in the center of his own balance and let the broom find him, and he flew the way Raphael had taught him to fall, making friends with the air on the way through it. And down below, Madame Hooch stopped shouting at the others and watched the green-eyed first-year carve the sky like he had been born up there. He caught Neville's dropped Remembrall out of a 50-foot dive with 2 fingers, more to stop it shattering than to show off, and that was how Harry Potter became, by the following week and entirely against his own preference for not being seen, the youngest seeker in a century. He did not love being seen. He loved the flying. He learned to separate the two, the way his father had taught him to separate the joy of a thing from the danger of it, and he played Quidditch as he did everything, quiet and balanced and impossible to rattle, and the Gryffindor stands learned to go silent when Harry went still in the air, because a still Harry was a Harry who had seen the snitch, and the diving that followed was a thing the whole school came out to watch. It was after his first match, flushed and grass-stained and happy in the loud common room, that he understood the shape of the year had changed, because that was the night the 3 of them, he and Ron and Hermione, fully became the 3 of them, welded by a half a year of shared trouble into the unit they would be for the rest of their lives. There had been a mountain troll at Halloween, and the 3 of them had faced it together in a flooded girls' bathroom, Ron's clumsy luck and Hermione's quick mind and Harry's silent footwork, a first-year levitation charm and a length of plumbing and a great deal of nerve, and they had walked out of that bathroom bonded in the way that only people who have nearly died together are ever bonded. Splinter, when Harry told him about the troll through the mirror, had been quiet a moment and then said, "Good. You have found the ones who will stand beside you. Hold them. A wizard who is not alone, Harry. Remember what I told you. You are building the only armor that matters, and you are building it without even knowing you are at the forge." He found the mirror at Christmas, and it nearly undid everything his father had built in him, which was, he understood later, exactly what it was made to do. He had stayed at the castle over the holiday, because the international crossing was a complicated thing to arrange twice in a season, and because his family, through the little glass, had agreed it was wiser to save the journey for the long summer that was coming. So he called home on Christmas morning and watched 5 faces open a parcel he had sent and listened to Mikey rename the holiday 3 times, and he was, mostly, all right. But the castle at night was very large and very empty over the holidays, and on the 3rd night Harry could not sleep, and he went walking as he walked the tunnels, silent, unseen, just to feel his own feet under him, and somewhere in an unused classroom in a forgotten wing, he found a tall mirror standing alone against the wall, old gold, taller than a door, with words carved around its frame in a script that read backward. He stood in front of it, and he stopped breathing for a moment, which his father would not have approved of, because he forgot the candle entirely. In the glass, the empty classroom was not empty. He was there, his own reflection, green-eyed and small, and standing close behind him with a hand on each of his shoulders were a man and a woman he had never seen and knew at once. A man with his own untidy dark hair and laughing eyes, a woman with his own green ones, Lily and James, young and whole and alive, and looking down at him with a love that reached out of the glass and closed around his throat. And he might have stood there forever, drowning in the 2 faces he had been made by and never known, except that the mirror showed him more, because they were not alone in it. Behind James, leaning in to see, was a green-skinned shape in a blue mask. Beside Lily, grinning, an orange one, a red one with his arms crossed and the suspicion worn like armor over something softer, a purple one already opening his mouth to ask the mirror how it worked. And at the center of all of them, behind Harry, taller than the rest, with one gray, weathered hand resting on the crown of Harry's dark head exactly where it had rested 10,000 times, stood an old rat, calm and proud and unafraid, and the mirror held all of them in one frame, his dead parents and his living family, both at once, the 2 halves of his life standing in one impossible room with no ocean between them and no war anywhere near, all of them safe, all of them together. All of them his, that was the thing the mirror knew, not gold, not glory, not even his mother's face alone. The deepest want at the bottom of Harry Potter was the simplest one there is, everyone I love in one room safe together. He looked at it and he ached as he had never let himself ache, and he came back the next night, and the night after, and on the 3rd night an old voice spoke quietly from the dark behind him. "Back again, Harry. Dumbledore was sitting in the shadows along the wall, and he came and stood beside Harry before the glass and looked into it, and Harry did not ask what the headmaster saw, because some questions are not yours to ask. The happiest man alive could look in this mirror and see only himself, exactly as he is, Dumbledore said. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest desire of our hearts. You who have never had your family, see your family. It is the most human thing in the world and the most dangerous because men have wasted away before this mirror, entranced by what they can never have. He turned to Harry and the blue eyes were kind. But yours is a strange reflection, I think. You see the dead and the living in one frame. Most who have lost a family see only the lost. You see the lost and the found together. That tells me something about how you were raised, Harry, that I am only beginning to understand, and it tells me you will not waste away here, because the thing you long for is not a ghost. 4/5 of it is alive and well and waiting for you across an ocean. The mirror will be moved tomorrow, and you must not go looking for it. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, remember that. But I am glad, before it goes, that you saw what you saw. A man who knows the true shape of his own heart is very hard to trick. Hold on to it. You may have need of it before the spring is out. The trouble that had been waiting under the year's surface broke through in the spring, and Harry saw it coming, because he had been raised to see. It started with a three-headed dog behind a locked door on the third-floor corridor, a corridor the headmaster had forbidden to students on pain of a very painful death, which was, Harry observed to his friends, an extraordinary thing to put in a school full of curious children, unless you wanted them curious about it. It went on with overheard fragments and noticed details. A break-in at the Wizard Bank on the very day, a small grubby package had been removed from a vault, a dog that was standing guard over a trapdoor, a teacher who flinched at the mention of the third floor. Harry collected the pieces the way Donatello had taught him to collect the pieces of a broken machine, laying them out, refusing to force a picture before the picture was earned, and slowly the machine assembled itself in his patient mind. Something was hidden under the castle, something worth killing for, guarded by the teachers, and someone inside the school was trying to steal it. It's a stone, Hermione breathed when their research finally cracked it, a great dusty library book opened between them. The Philosopher's Stone. It makes gold, and it makes the elixir of life. It makes you immortal. Someone wants to live forever. That's what's under the dog. That's what they're guarding. Someone wants to not die, Harry said slowly, and a cold understanding moved through him, because there was one person he had heard of who had wanted that more than anything, one person who had been torn out of his body and flung into the dark and not, McGonagall had said, killed cleanly. He thought of a stammering professor and a cold place in a room and a scar that had begun to ache for no reason. Someone who got most of the way to not dying once already and lost his body doing it and needs a way back. Ron looked between them. You think it's you-know-who. You think he's here. I think, said Harry, that I've been watching the wrong teacher be nervous. Quirrell isn't afraid of his students. He's afraid of something that's with him all the time. He stood, working it the way his father worked a problem, all the way to the bottom. And I think tonight he's going to go through that trapdoor, because Dumbledore was called away an hour ago by an owl that I'd bet my wand was forged, and that means tonight there's nothing between that stone and the thing that wants it but a locked door and 3 teachers' worth of traps. I have to go down there. We, said Hermione and Ron, at the same time in the same flat tone that did not leave room for argument, and Harry looked at the two of them, his first 2 friends, the ones who had decided his fame did not count and his strangeness did not matter, and he heard his father's voice in his memory. The standing beside is the strongest magic there is, and he did not tell them number we, he agreed. But you do exactly what I say down there, both of you, the second I say it, no arguing, because I was raised by people who go into dangerous places for a living, and you two were not. Agreed. Agreed, they said, and the 3 of them went, that night, down through the trapdoor under the sleeping castle, into the dark together. The guardians under the school were made to stop wizards, and Harry was not only a wizard, and that turned out to matter. The strangling plant let them go because Harry went still inside its grip instead of struggling, the way Raphael had drilled into him on the mats 10,000 times. You do not beat the thing that holds you by fighting it. You go quiet and let it decide you are not prey. And the plant, finding nothing to strangle, loosened, and Hermione's fire did the rest. The room of flying keys he crossed not by chasing the one bright broken-winged key through the swirling cloud of them, the way it was designed to be crossed, but by going still in the center of the room and watching the whole pattern until the one key's flight path showed itself, and then taking it clean out of the air with the balance of a seeker who had never once lunged for a thing in his life. The giant chessboard cost them. Ron rode the great stone knight into a sacrifice that bought their crossing and left him bleeding and still on the squares, and Harry knelt over his friend for one terrible moment before Ron's eyes flickered and held, and Harry left him there only because Ron, white-faced, gripped his wrist and said, "Go, finish it. That's what your dad would say, isn't it? Go," and Harry, who had been taught that you honor a sacrifice by making it count, went. The next room was a riddle and not a fight, and that was Hermione's room, and everyone in it knew it. A line of bottles stood on a narrow table between a wall of black flame ahead and a wall of purple flame behind, with a verse that promised one drink would carry the drinker forward and one back, and the rest were nettle wine and poison and worse. Harry could have solved it the slow, patient way his father had taught him, by stillness and elimination, but he did not need to, because Hermione read the verse through twice and went quiet and logical and lethal, and inside a minute her finger came down on the smallest bottle. "That one carries you forward through the black," she said. "There's only a swallow of it, enough for one. And that round one takes you back through the purple, to Ron." She looked at the two bottles, and then at Harry, and the cleverness in her face cracked for a moment around something she would not name. He sent Hermione back from the last chamber to tend Ron and send word over her objection, and he did it the way his father gave orders, not as a boy bossing his friends, but as a soldier deploying the people he loved where they would do the most good and take the least harm. "You're the cleverest," he told her. "If I don't come back up, you're the one who can tell them what's down here. That's not me protecting you, that's me using you right. Go," and she went because it was true, and because no one had ever before in her life valued her cleverness over her safety, and that was its own kind of gift. Then Harry went on alone, through black fire that parted for a still mind and a steady hand, into the last room under the school, to find out which brother held steadier. Professor Quirrell stood before a tall mirror at the center of the bare stone chamber, and he was not stammering anymore. "Harry Potter," he said, smooth now, unwound, the nervous mask hung up like a coat. "I wondered if it would be you, the famous baby, the quiet little seeker. You have been watching me all year. I felt it. Most of them never watch at all. Where did a child learn to watch like that?" "In a good house," said Harry, and stopped a careful distance from the mirror, in the center of his own balance, his hands loose, his breath low, reading the room the way his father had taught him. The exits, the footing, the cold, heavy thing on the bottom of the pond. "You don't want the stone for yourself. You're the hands. There's somebody else here. I've felt him all year too. He's the cold." Quirrell's composure flickered. And then a voice that was not Quirrell's came out of Quirrell, thin and high and terrible. A voice that scraped down the inside of Harry's skull and woke the scar to a white blaze of the old pain, and said, "Clever. Clever child. He sees more than you do, Quirrell. Let me speak to him. Let me see the face of the only one who ever survived me." The turban came away, and on the back of Quirrell's head there was a face, a ruined gray face with red eyes and slits for a nose, the thing that had been flung into the dark 11 years ago and had been crawling back ever since, and it looked at Harry with the patient hatred of a creature that has waited a long time. And Harry stood in the center of his own balance and looked back at the thing that had murdered his mother, and did not run, and did not flinch, and the scar burned like a brand, and he breathed. "There you are," Harry said, very quietly, exactly the words his father had said to him through the mirror in October, and he did not know why he chose them except that they were the steadiest words he owned. "I've been wondering when I'd meet you. You killed my mother. Your mother need not have died," hissed the high, cold voice. "She chose to, foolish woman, throwing her life away for an infant, such waste, but you could be more sensible. Help me reach the stone and I will let you live, and I will give you what no one else can. Power, real power. The kind that means you never have to be weak again, never have to be small again, never have to hide in the dark again. I can see it in you, child, all that strength held down, held still, wasted on patience. I can teach you to stop wasting it. Together we could do extraordinary things." And there it was, laid out plain, the offer at the bottom of everything, and Harry understood in that moment exactly what his father had meant on the night of the two shadows, when he had said the Shredder and the Dark Wizard were the same mistake in two costumes. Power you take and keep and point at others. Strength that has never once learned to hold its own hilt. "You don't understand what you're looking at," Harry said, and his voice was steady, and it was almost gentle, and that, more than any spell, was the thing that made the red eyes narrow. "You think the stillness is strength held down. You think I'm a furnace somebody talked into banking itself. You've got it exactly backwards. The stillness isn't me wasting the power. The stillness is where the power comes from. My father spent 11 years teaching me that the strongest thing in the world isn't the strike. It's the balance. You've got all that skill, and you never learned to hold the hilt, so the sword's been cutting you your whole life. Look at you. You're a face on the back of a slave's head, begging an 11-year-old for help. That's where your kind of power gets you. I'll pass." "Insolent," shrieked the voice. "Quirrell, kill him, take him." Quirrell lunged and Harry moved. He did not move the way a wizard moves, with a shouted spell and a flung wand, and that was what saved his life, because everything Quirrell had been told to expect was wizard-shaped. Harry moved the way a thing raised under the city moves, low and silent, and already somewhere else. A fall turned into a roll, turned into a rise, and Quirrell's grasping hands closed on the place where he had been. And where they had been a half-second before, Harry's own hand had come up, not in a fist, because Splinter's house did not raise creatures who struck first, but open, flat, laid against the back of Quirrell's reaching hand the way you lay a hand on a flame to feel its heat calm on a still pond, on a day he had not chosen but would not waste. Quirrell screamed. Where Harry's skin touched his, the dark wizard's flesh blistered and cracked and burned, as though Harry's hand were the brand and not the scar. And Harry understood, in a flash of cold, clear knowing, what his mother had done to him 11 years ago and left behind, that there are kinds of love that go all the way to the bone and stay there, that a woman who dies with her arms out over a child writes a protection into his skin that the loveless cannot touch without burning. And he understood that he had been given a second one, slower, deeper, written over 11 years instead of a single night, written every dawn at the candle and every fall on the mats and every name kept and every hand laid on the crown of his head, the protection of a family that does not break, layered into him so thick that the creature of pure taking before him could not lay hands on the creature of pure being held without coming apart. So Harry did not pull away. He held on calm, balanced, while the dark thing shrieked and burned, and he said through the screaming, not in triumph but almost in something like pity, "This is what it does to you. Being touched by something you can't take, you should have learned the other thing. There was still time. There was always time, right up until now." The spirit tore itself free of the burning body in a howl of black smoke that knocked Harry off his feet at last and rose through the chamber like a thing climbing out of a grave, and it gathered at the ceiling, formless and red-eyed and screaming its hatred, and before it fled it spoke one last time, and the high cold voice had murder in it, and underneath the murder, for the first time, the thin sour note of fear. "I am not finished, Harry Potter. I am never finished. I will find a body and I will grow strong and I will come for you, and for everything you have ever laid your loveless little protections around. Your friends, your school, and that house. That secret house under that other city with the rat and his 4 monsters who think they have hidden you from me. Oh yes, I plucked it from this fool's burning mind in the last second. I know where your heart lives now, child. When I come back, I will not come for you. I will come for them, and I will make you watch, and then we will see how steady your precious balance holds." And it was gone up through the stone, out into the night, leaving Harry on the floor of the chamber beside the crumbling body of its servant, with his mother's protection burning in his hands and his father's voice steady in his memory, and a single cold new fact lodged in him like a splinter. The dark had learned the way home. He woke 3 days later in the hospital wing, with sunlight on white sheets and an old wizard with a long silver beard sitting beside the bed. Albus Dumbledore answered the questions Harry was strong enough to ask, and was honest about the ones he would not answer, which Harry, raised by a creature who knew the weight of withheld truths, respected even as it frustrated him. The stone was safe and was being destroyed. Its maker had decided with great calm that for a mind organized in the right way death was only the next great adventure. Quirrell was dead, and the thing that had worn him was not. "He is out there still," Dumbledore said quietly. "Weakened, formless, but not gone, never quite gone. He will seek another way back. I had hoped you would have more years before you had to know this. You have stolen those years from me by being, I am afraid, far too perceptive for your own peace." The blue eyes searched Harry's face. "You did a thing in that chamber that no one taught you, Harry, and that I do not fully understand. You held him and he burned. There is an old magic in that, the oldest there is, and your mother began it and you have somehow deepened it. Where did you learn to stand so still before such a thing? Not from us. We did not teach you that." "No," said Harry. "You didn't," and he did not explain, because the second condition was the one he never broke, and a stammering professor's dying mind had already given the dark wizard too much, and Harry would not give the wizarding world the rest. "Professor, he said something before he left. He said he wouldn't come for me. He said he'd come for the people I love and make me watch." His hands closed on the white sheet. "I need you to be honest with me about one thing, and I'll know if you're not, because I was raised by somebody who taught me what a managed answer feels like. Is he strong enough to do that now? Today? This summer?" Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said at last. "Not today, not this summer. He is a rumor of himself, a thing that can possess a weak animal and whisper in a willing ear no more. To do what he threatened, he would need a body and servants and years. You have time, Harry. I will not tell you that you have safety because you do not and you would not believe me, but you have time. Use it the way the person who raised you would tell you to use it. And Harry, on the white sheets in the sunlight, thought of his father saying you have time, and you will need the stillness more than you know, and sooner than I would wish, and understood that the two halves of his life had just spoken the same sentence across an ocean, and that the war the cream paper had promised in his first hour had finally, after 11 years, learned the address of the only home he had. That night against the rules, in the hospital wing dark, he warmed the mirror in his hand and called home, and when the green faces and the gray-whiskered one crowded into the little glass, he did not tell them about the troll or the chess or the stone. He told them the one thing they needed to know, the way his father had taught him to deliver a hard truth, straight and unsoftened, and to all of them at once. He knows about you, Harry said. The thing that killed my parents. He's not dead and he's coming back, and when he does, he's not coming for me. He's coming for the lair, he said so. He's going to make me watch. He looked at the 5 faces he loved beyond any naming, lit blue in the cold castle dark. So I'm coming home for the summer, and we're going to get ready, all of us, both worlds, because he thinks he found my weakness when he found my family. The green eyes were very steady. He found the wrong sewer. In the little mirror, Splinter looked at his youngest son across an ocean, and the old face was grave and proud and unafraid, and he said only, "Then come home, my son. The candle is lit. We have a great deal to prepare, and we will prepare it together, and we will not be afraid, because fear is a wind on the water, and we have learned to let it pass. Come home, we will be exactly here." Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The gathering storm. The years between were good years, which is a thing worth saying plainly, because the storm that ended them tried very hard to make everyone forget that they had ever been good at all. Harry grew. He went north each September and came home each summer down the ladder and through the dark to the candle and the tea, and the going and the coming became the tide his whole life moved by. He learned the rules of his magic as he had been promised, and he learned them faster than anyone at the school had seen, because a wizard who already knows how to hold a working still in a quiet mind learns the loud workings in half the time. He got tall. His voice changed. The thin scar stayed where it was. And the family changed too. In the small ways families change when you are not watching. Donatello's workshop grew into a thing that hummed with salvaged genius. Leonardo's steadiness hardened into the patience of a true leader. Raphael learned slowly, by inches with much backsliding, to let a thing be loved without standing guard over it, and Michelangelo stayed exactly Michelangelo, which was, Harry came to understand, the hardest discipline of all of them, to keep the joy alive in a world that kept giving you reasons to put it down. And Splinter got older. That was the one change Harry did not want to look at directly. The gray in the old face went grayer. The Don Kata grew shorter by a few movements each year, though Splinter would have died before admitting it, and did not have to, because his sons learned to shorten their own without a word, so that he never trained alone at a pace he could no longer hold. He was still the stillest thing in any room. But Harry had been raised to read what a body was telling him, and his father's body had begun, very quietly, to tell him a number, and Harry did not want the number, and so he loved his father harder instead, the way you do when you have started to count. In the wizarding world, the storm gathered the way the cream paper had promised it would, 12 years late and exactly on time. The thing that had fled the chamber under the school did not stay a rumor of itself. It found servants. It found a way. There was a night in Harry's 4th year that Harry would not speak of for a long time. A graveyard and a stolen ritual and a body clawed back out of the dark. And at the end of that night, the thing that had murdered his parents stood on its own 2 feet again under its own red eyes. Embodied, restored, with a name the world was once more afraid to say, and a circle of masked servants kneeling in the dark, and a single thought turning behind those red eyes that it had carried since a stone chamber years before. That somewhere across an ocean, in a city under a city, there was a house full of monsters, and a rat who had raised the only child ever to make Lord Voldemort burn. Harry came home from that graveyard night broken, in a place the family had never seen broken, and the family did the only thing it had ever known how to do with a broken thing, which was to close around it in the dark and hold on. He came down the ladder near dawn, brought across the ocean by an emergency crossing that McGonagall had triggered the moment the wards at the school screamed, and he did not say anything at first. He just came down into the candlelight with another student's blood still on his hands, a Hogwarts boy named Cedric who had been kind and brave and 17, and had died in a graveyard for the crime of standing next to Harry when a Dark Lord wanted a target, and Harry had carried his body back because you do not leave a fallen friend in the enemy's dark, and now he stood at the foot of the ladder in his own home and could not, for the first time in years, Find the still pond anywhere inside himself. No one asked him to perform being all right. That was the gift of the house. Leonardo took the bloodied robe off his shoulders without a word. Donatello pressed a warm cup into his hands and folded Harry's fingers around it. Raphael stood at his back, a wall against the ladder and the dark beyond it, the old post he had kept since a basket came down a flood. Michelangelo sat down on the floor at Harry's feet and leaned his head against his brother's knee, which is the thing Mikey had always known to do, the thing none of them could have learned from a scroll. And Splinter came, slow now, older now, and set his weathered hand on the crown of Harry's dark head, exactly where it had rested 10,000 times since the first hour, and let it stay. "He's back," Harry said at last, to the candle, because he could not yet say it to their faces. "He has a body again. He killed Cedric in front of me to get it, and there was nothing I could do. I was tied to a stone and I watched, and then he wanted to duel me like it was a game, like my parents were a game, and I got out, and Cedric didn't, because Cedric was all ready." The cup shook in his hands and Donatello steadied it from beneath without taking it away. "He's coming for us now, all of us." "He said your name, Sensei." In the graveyard in front of his whole circle, he said there was a rat across the ocean who'd raised the only thing that ever beat him, and he laughed, and his people laughed, and I had to lie there and listen to them laugh about my family. Splinter's hand did not move from his son's head. "Let them laugh," the old rat said, very quietly. "Laughter from such a creature is only fear wearing a costume it cannot take off. He says my name to make himself brave. He does not know what the name means. He thinks it is the name of a thing he will kill." The hand pressed once, warm, certain. "It is the name of the house that will end him. Drink your tea, my son. Mourn your friend, we will mourn him with you, all of us properly, for he sounds like he was worth mourning. And then we will begin, because grief that is given somewhere to stand becomes the strongest thing a creature owns, and we are going to give yours an entire war to stand on." He did not come at once. That was the worst of it, the patience of him, the new and terrible patience he had learned the one time he had been beaten. He rebuilt his strength. He let Harry's side win small victories and grow comfortable, and he sent, quietly, across the ocean, the one servant whose particular talent was finding things that did not want to be found. His name was Selwyn, and he was a tracker, and he came to the city the way a disease comes, without announcement, settling into the cracks. The family knew something was wrong 3 weeks before they knew what. The tunnels had a new silence in places, the wrong kind, the held breath kind. Donatello's sensors caught movement that did not move like maintenance crews or like the Lost. Twice on the surface runs, the brothers came home certain they had been followed by something that left no trace, which frightened them more than a thing that left tracks, because they were the ones who left no tracks, and now someone was doing it back to them. And Harry's scar, the old ache, woke and stayed awake, a low warning hum behind his eye that he had learned over the years, to trust the way Raphael trusted a coughing hinge. "He's found us," Harry told the family at the low table, and he did not soften it because his father had taught him that a hard truth wrapped in cotton only smothers slower. Not him, not yet. A scout. Somebody good enough to track ninja through their own tunnels, which means a wizard, which means it started. He's testing the walls. "Looking for the door, then we find him first," said Raphael, already half up. Splinter's voice was quiet and it stopped the room. "We do not hunt a tracker. A tracker wants to be hunted. It is how he learns the ground. We will not give him our ground by chasing him across it. We will make him come to us on a night we choose into a place we have prepared, and we will take him whole, because a captured scout is worth more than a dead one. A dead scout tells his master only that the house bites. A captured one tells us everything his master knows." The old rat looked around the table. "We have time, not much. But the one who taught Harry patience will not abandon it now that the lesson matters most. We prepare, we do not rush. Rushing is falling." They prepared. And it was not enough because the tracker Selwyn was very good, and he did not wait for the night they had chosen. He came on an ordinary evening, while half the family was on the surface and half below, and he came not to fight but to confirm, slipping down a service shaft Donnie had thought too narrow to matter, and he got close enough to see the candlelight of the lair through a grate before the alarm Donatello had wired sang out, and then the ordinary evening tour opened into the first battle of the war. It was fast and it was ugly, and it happened in the cramped wrong place none of them had drilled for. The family's own home turned into a killing maze. Selwyn was alone, but he was a wizard, and the brothers had trained against many things, but never against a man who could throw fire from a stick and fold himself sideways out of a thrown sigh with a crack of displaced air. He cut Leonardo's arm to the bone with a slash of light. He put Donatello through a workbench. But a family that has trained together since before it could speak does not stay scattered for long, and the wizard's first advantage burned away fast. Leonardo, one arm hanging useless and bright with blood, stopped trying to close and instead began to call the room, low and clear, as he had run 100 drills, and his brothers answered without looking, folding back into formation around the intruder so that wherever Selwyn turned, the open angle he wanted had closed a half-second before he reached it. Raphael drove him off the high ground, his strikes held just barely inside their discipline, taking a scorch across the shell rather than give an inch of the shrine. Michelangelo flowed under a curse that should have ended him and came up grinning and breathless on the far side, having stolen nothing but the wizard's certainty that he understood what he was fighting. And Donatello, half-stunned, dragged himself to the wall and killed the lair's lights with one slap of his hand, and for 3 heartbeats the home ground belonged entirely to the creatures who had been raised in the dark, and Selwyn, blind in a black room full of silent enemies, learned why his master had sent a tracker and not an army. He decided in that dark that he had what he came for, and that living to deliver it was worth more than the kill, and he broke for the shaft. He was backing toward the shaft he had come down, his work done, the address learned, the proof in his eyes, already turning to carry it home to his master, when he threw one last curse over his shoulder, careless, cruel, a killing green light flung not at a fighter but at the smallest moving thing in the room, which was Michelangelo, scrambling up from where the wizard had knocked him, unguarded, wide open, with no time at all to fall. And Splinter crossed the room. No one saw him decide. There was no deciding in it. There was only an old rat who had carried a baby out of a flood and raised 5 sons in the dark, moving faster than his aging body had any right to move, putting himself into the space between the green light and his orange-banded child, the way a woman with green eyes had once put herself into the space between a green light and her son. The curse took him in the chest. It lifted him and threw him the length of the lair, and he struck the far wall and slid down it and was still, and the candle by the shrine guttered and the whole world stopped. Harry was at the foot of the ladder. He had come down at the alarm, 3 rungs at a time, and he arrived in the doorway in the exact moment his father hit the wall, and something happened in him that had never happened before, something the careful years had not prepared him for, because there is no preparing for it. The stillness did not break. That was the thing he would think about after for a long time. He had always assumed that if this ever came, the day the worst thing came, the stillness would shatter and the power would go off like a flare, and he would become, for one terrible moment, the very thing his father had spent a lifetime teaching him not to be. It did not happen. The grief came and the rage came, the whole black flood of it came, and it met the still pond his father had built in him stone by stone over 18 years, and the pond did not break. It held the flood. It held all of it and turned it, the way Splinter had turned a flood with a staff over a black throat 18 years before, not fighting the current but bending it, and what came out the far side of that turning was not a flare and not a scream. What came out was the most precise thing Harry Potter had ever done. Selwyn, halfway up the shaft, his task complete, never finished the climb. He felt the air go solid around him, every inch of it at once, a grip on nothing closing over his whole body, the way a small cold hand had closed over a fistful of night on a ledge 18 years before, except that this was not a frightened child catching himself. This was a master, calm, balanced, on a day he had not chosen but would not waste, and the air held the wizard the way a fist holds a wasp, and drew him back down the shaft and set him on the floor of the lair and held him there, and did not let him reach his wand and did not break a single bone, because Splinter's house did not raise creatures who hurt the helpless, even now, even with the old rat crumpled against the far wall and the whole family's world ending. "Donnie," Harry said, and his voice was so level that it frightened his brothers more than any scream would have. "Get Sensei, tell me he's breathing. Leo, your arm, sit down before you bleed out. Raph, this one's wand, kick it across the room, don't touch him, the air's got him." He did not look away from the held wizard. He could not have moved the grip if he had. "He's going to tell us everything, but first somebody tell me my father is breathing." There was a terrible pause, the longest of Harry's life. "He's breathing," Donatello said from across the room, his voice cracking on it, his clever hands pressed to the old chest. "Harry, he's breathing, it's bad, it's really bad, but he's..." The curse, it didn't. It should have killed him instantly, and it didn't. It's like it hit something. It's like something blunted it. And Harry, holding a dark wizard motionless in a fist of solid air, looked across the lair at his father's body that a killing curse had failed to kill, and understood, with a cold, clear knowing that would carry him all the way to the end of the war, exactly what had blunted it. The same thing that had blunted it in a nursery 18 years before. The same thing that had burned a Dark Lord's servant to ash under a child's open hand. There are kinds of love that go all the way to the bone and stay there, and a father who steps in front of a killing curse for his child writes the oldest protection there is into the air around them both. And Lord Voldemort, in all his patience and all his power, had still not learned the one thing, the only thing that he would need to learn to win, and would never learn because it cannot be taken, only given, and he had spent his whole long life refusing the gift. Splinter did not die. But he did not rise, either, not for many days, and the lair learned to hold its breath. They could not take him to a hospital, of course. There was no hospital in the world for what he was. But there was Hermione Granger, now grown clever past the cleverness of any healer at the school, who came across the ocean the moment Harry's mirror went dark and silent in the middle of a sentence, and who walked down the ladder into the secret heart of Harry's life without one wasted second spent on wonder, because her friend needed her, and the wonder could wait. And there was an old book of healing magic, and Donatello's salvaged genius, and the deep stubborn vitality of a creature who had survived a cage and a mutation and 18 years of raising children in the dark, and between all of it, Splinter held on. Harry sat with him through the worst of the nights. It was on the fourth night, when the fever finally broke and the old eyes opened clear for the first time, that Splinter gave his youngest son the last and deepest of all his lessons, and he gave it in a cracked whisper from a sickbed, which was, Harry understood, the only place a lesson that large could fit. "You held the flood," Splinter breathed. "When I fell, I felt it, even going down. The whole room went quiet instead of loud. You held it." His weathered hand found Harry's. "Tell me what you felt." "The true thing, not the brave thing. I felt like the world ended," Harry said, because his father had asked for the true thing, and so he reached past the brave thing for it. "I felt the worst thing I've ever felt. All of it came at once, and it hit the stillness you built in me, and the stillness held it, and I turned it into the air around Selwyn instead of a scream. And I don't understand how, Sensei. You taught me to stay calm. You didn't teach me to stay calm while the worst thing in the world was happening. How did the calm hold?" "Because it was never calm," Splinter whispered, and his grip tightened, urgent now, because this was the thing, this was the whole of it, this was what he had been carrying toward this moment for 18 years. "Hear me, my son, because I may not have many more chances to say it, and you must have it whole. They will tell you, the Dark Ones, that to be strong you must feel nothing, that the still pond is an empty pond, that the Master is the one who has burned the feeling out of himself until nothing can move him. That is the great lie. That is the Shredder's lie, and it is Voldemort's lie, and it is the same lie in two costumes, as I told you when you were small. The empty pond is not strong. The empty pond is dead." He drew a ragged breath. "The still pond is the fullest pond there is. It holds everything. It holds all the love and all the grief and all the fear, the whole flood, every drop, and it does not spill, not because it feels nothing, but because it is deep enough to hold an ocean without breaking its own surface. You did not stay calm because you stopped loving me. You stayed calm because you loved me so much that the love itself became the depth that held the grief. Do you understand? The love is not the thing that breaks your balance. The love is the floor your balance stands on. The deeper you love, the more you can hold without spilling. That is the secret. That is the power he does not know, that he has never known, that he threw away the day he decided feeling was weakness. He made himself shallow to make himself strong, and a shallow thing cannot hold a flood. And you, my son, are the deepest pond I have ever seen, because you were loved every single day of your life, and so there is no flood in this world large enough to break you." Harry held his father's hand in the dark and did not let go. "Then I know how to beat him," he said quietly after a long time. "I've known since I was 3 and I didn't know I knew it. He's going to come with everything he has. Death Eaters and fear, and a body he tore back out of the dark, and the one thing he can't imagine losing to is a kid who's just better at not feeling than he is. So I'm not going to meet him with an empty pond. I'm going to meet him with the fullest one there is. I'm going to bring everyone I love into one room, the way the mirror showed me, both worlds, all of them, and I'm going to stand in the middle of all that love and let him throw the whole storm at it and watch it not spill. He found my family and he thinks he found my weakness." The green eyes were steady and they were not empty. They were full to the brim and they did not spill. "He found the floor I'm going to stand on to end him. There he is," Splinter breathed, and the old face, gray and worn and pulled back from the edge of the dark, settled into the thing it had been settling into since the first hour of Harry's life. "There is my son. Now help me sit up. If we are going to bring two worlds into one room, your father is not going to greet them lying down." So the lair became a war council, and that was, in the middle of everything, the strangest and warmest thing that had ever happened in it. They came down the ladder one by one over the following days, the people from Harry's other world, into the secret heart of his first one, and the family met each of them as hosts, because that had never once stopped being the law. Minerva McGonagall came, and took her tea from Leonardo as she had the first time, and looked at the recovering Splinter with a respect that had only deepened across the years. Remus Lupin came, gentle and gray and tired, the last living friend of the parents Harry had never known, and he sat with Harry a long while and told him things about Lily and James that no one else was left alive to tell, and Harry kept every one of them. Ron came and was so plainly, uncomplicatedly delighted by the turtles that within an hour he and Michelangelo were old friends, which was exactly the medicine the Grimm house needed. Hermione never left. She had set up in a corner of Donatello's workshop, and the two of them had filled it with diagrams, and the sound of two of the cleverest minds Harry had ever known building something together became the constant background hum of the war. And Sirius Black came, last, ducking down the ladder, and stopped at the bottom of it, and looked across the lair at the gray rat sitting, propped against cushions by the candle, the creature who had raised his godson while he had rotted in a wizard prison for a crime he did not commit. And the two guardians of Harry Potter looked at each other across a worn mat for a long moment, the wronged godfather and the rat who had done the job he could not, and no one in the lair breathed. "You're the one," Sirius said at last, roughly. "You're the one who had him, all those years when I couldn't. You're the one who pulled him out of the water and raised him right." He came across the room and lowered himself down, stiff, beside the cushions on the floor at Splinter's level. "I spent a long time hating whoever had my godson. I built a hole. I had a lot of years to build it, and then I met him, and he was the best person I'd ever. And I couldn't figure out where he got it, because it sure as hell wasn't from the Dursleys, and now I'm sitting in a sewer looking at a rat, and I get it. I get it now." His voice was not steady. "Thank you, for doing the thing I'd have died to do and couldn't. Thank you for my godson." And Splinter, who was too weak to rise, reached out his weathered hand, and Sirius Black took it, and the two fathers of Harry Potter held on, and that was the moment the two worlds truly became one, not in the planning and not in the fighting, but there, on the floor, between two guardians who had each in their own dark refused to let a child be lost. "He is not only your godson and not only my son," Splinter said quietly. "He is ours. He has always had more family than the world thought to give him. That is why he will win. Now sit with us. There is tea and there is a great deal to plan, and my son Michelangelo is about to do a thing he calls naming the pizza, and I must warn you it is treated in this house with the seriousness of Scripture, and you will be expected to vote." The training began the next day, and it was the strangest dojo the world had ever seen, and it taught both worlds a great deal, most of it about each other. Remus Lupin stood at the center of the practice floor with his sleeves rolled up and showed the turtles the shapes of the thing that was coming for them. "A wizard fights in lines," he said, drawing them in the air with a lit wand tip slow, so they could read them. "Light travels straight. A curse goes where it's pointed and keeps going. We're trained to aim, to overpower, to make you flinch so your own flinch kills you. What we are not trained for, ever, is an enemy who isn't where we pointed by the time the light arrives." He looked at Leonardo. "Show me. I'll send a slow one, harmless, a light jinx, and you do the thing Harry does. Don't block it. Don't run, just not be there." He cast slow and bright, and Leonardo read the line of it as he read everything, exact and unhurried, and stepped a single foot to the left, and the light went past his shoulder and broke harmlessly on the wall, and Lupin lowered his wand and looked for a moment like a man who had glimpsed a door he had not known was in the room. "Do it again," said Hermione, already writing. "Faster. Ron, time the gap between when his wand commits and when Leo moves." "I think they're reading the wand, not the light. If they're reading the wrist, we can teach the whole order to faint." "You can't faint a turtle, lady," said Raphael, not unkindly, catching a thrown practice curse out of the air on the flat of a sigh and letting it spend itself harmlessly into the floor, a trick Donatello had spent 2 nights wiring the sigh to do. "We've been getting fainted at our whole lives by each other. You wizards telegraph. No offense. You all wind up like you're throwing a baseball." "That is the single most useful insult I have ever received," said Lupin, delighted, and made them all do it again. It went both ways, and the going both ways was the point. The turtles taught the wizards to move in the dark, to stop relying on the light at their wand tips that announced them to every shadow in a room, to trust their feet and their ears the way creatures raised underground trusted them. Donatello and Hermione vanished into the workshop and came out with things that should not have existed: a wizard's enchantment married to a ninja's machine, smoke that swallowed spell light, a net that a curse could not cut because it was not, technically, solid. Michelangelo taught Ron to fall, the Raphael way, you and the ground work it out together, and Ron, who had been falling off brooms his whole life without any technique at all, took to it like a revelation. Sirius, who had spent 12 years in a cell learning to be very still and very patient in the dark, turned out to need almost no teaching at all in the ninja arts, and he and Raphael recognized something in each other across the practice floor, two guardians who had each been made hard by a wrong done to them, and they sparred in the evenings, wizard against ninja, and laughed, and it was good for both of them. And Splinter watched from his cushions by the candle, too weak still to take the floor, and gave the whole strange war school the thing only he could give, the frame around it. "You are not learning to fight like each other," he told them all one evening, when the practice had wound down and the two worlds sat together over tea. "That is not the point, and it will get you killed if you try it. Leonardo will never throw fire from a stick, and Mr. Lupin will never move through 300 shadows the way my sons do. The point is not to become each other. The point is to trust each other so completely that you stop being two things at all. A hand does not try to become an eye. But a hand that trusts its eye can catch a thing out of the air in the dark. We are not building an army of wizards or an army of ninja. We are building one body with many hands and many eyes, and when it moves against him, he will not be able to find the seam between the magic and the discipline, because by then there will not be one." He set down his cup. "He fights alone, always, even surrounded by servants, because he trusts no one and is trusted by no one. We are going to send against him a single creature with 12 loving hearts, and he will not even understand what he is looking at until it has already closed around him." The plan they built was Harry's, and it was clever the way his father had taught him to be clever, and clever the way Donatello had taught him to be clever, which were two different things welded into one. They would not wait to be hunted. A hunted thing gives up its ground. Instead, they would give Voldemort exactly what his tracker had died without delivering: the location of the lair, fed to him through a careful leak, irresistible bait, the secret house where the boy who lived had been raised, and where, the leak would whisper, the rat who had blunted a killing curse kept some old protective magic that was the source of it all. Voldemort would not be able to stay away. He had spent 18 years unable to understand why the child burned him, and here was the promise of the answer, and his own pride would carry him to it. He would come, and he would bring his strength, because a careful enemy brings everything to the place he believes holds his rival's secret. But he would not come to the lair. He would come to the place they let him think was the lair. A vast derelict cathedral on the city's edge, deconsecrated, half-fallen, a cavern of stone and broken glass, and 100 high dark galleries and 1,000 shadows. The worst possible ground in the world for a wizard who fought in straight lines of light, and the best possible ground in the world for a family that had spent its whole life learning to own the dark. "He fights like he thinks," Harry said, laying it out for the council by candlelight, the brothers and the wizards leaning in over Donnie and Hermione's map. "Straight lines, overwhelming force, fear as a weapon. Everything he does assumes you'll either run or freeze, because that's all he's ever seen people do. He's never once fought someone who'd just step a foot to the left and let the lightning go past. He's never fought in a place with 300 shadows and people and every one of them who love each other enough to die in the right order. We don't beat him with more power. Nobody has more power than him. We beat him with balance and ground, and the one thing he refuses to understand. We make him bring the storm, and we make him watch it not spill, and when his whole theory of the world breaks against a room full of people who won't run and won't freeze and won't stop loving each other no matter what he does, that's the opening. That's the half-second. And in that half-second, we end it." He looked around the candle-lit ring of them, his two worlds in one room at last, the turtles and the wizards, Leo and Lupin, Raph and Sirius, Donnie and Hermione, Ron and Mikey, McGonagall and his father propped on his cushions with his eyes clear and proud. Every single one of them family, every single one of them the floor he was going to stand on. "He thinks he's coming to take my heart," Harry said quietly. "He's right. He just doesn't know my heart is a trap, and the trap is that it's real." On the last night before they went to ready the ground, the family did the thing the family always did before a hard thing, which was to be ordinary together on purpose, with the whole strangeness of two worlds folded into one warm room and made, for one evening, into nothing but home. There was tea, and Leonardo poured it for all of them, wizard and turtle alike, as he had poured it for a deputy headmistress in this same room years before. There was the candle on the low table, lit, steady, the one fixed point of Harry's whole life. And there was a pizza, because there is always a pizza, carried home from the surface on the last safe run, and Michelangelo laid it on the table and considered it with the gravity the occasion demanded, and the room went quiet, because even the wizards had learned by now that this was treated in the House of Splinter with the seriousness of Scripture. "This one's hard," Mikey admitted, looking down at it. "Usually I know right away, but this one's going into a fight tomorrow, so." He was quiet a moment, and when he looked up his round face was doing several things at once and not hiding any of them. I'm calling it the whole family, because that's what's at the table. For the first time ever, that's the whole entire family, both halves, everybody Harry loves in one room eating one pizza. The mirror showed him this once. I remember him telling me. He saw everybody in one frame and it was the thing he wanted most in the whole world. His voice wobbled and he let it. So that's the name, the whole family, all in favor. Every hand in the room went up. Wizard hands and turtle hands and an old rat's weathered hand, all of them, the whole entire family, and Harry, the keeper of the names, wrote it on the long list in his head and kept it, and knew it was the best one there had ever been or would ever be. Later, when the others had found their corners to sleep in, Splinter called Harry to the shrine for the last quiet word, and the brothers came too, because they always came, and Sirius hung back at the edge of the candlelight until Splinter beckoned him in, because the two fathers had agreed, without saying it, that there would be no edges in this family tonight. Tomorrow we set the ground, Splinter said. The night after he comes. I will not be able to fight beside you as I once would have. My body is not what it was, and we will not pretend otherwise, because we do not lie to each other in this house. He looked at Harry, and then at all four of his other sons, and then at the wizards who had become his family by the only route that matters, which is by loving the same person. So I will give you the thing I can still give, which is the last of my teaching, and it is very short because the deepest things always are. When he comes, he will try to make you afraid. It is the only weapon he truly has. The curses are just the delivery. He will show you death, and he will show you the people you love in danger, and he will wait for the fear to break your balance, because that is the only way he has ever beaten anyone. Do not fight the fear. You cannot fight it, and you should not try. Let it come. Let it come all the way in and stand in the love that is deeper than it, and let the fear find that there is no bottom to the love for it to break against. That is all. That is everything I know. Be the deepest pond, my children. He has only ever fought shallow ones. His old eyes went around the ring of them, full and unspilling. Now sleep. Tomorrow we build the trap. And we will build it together, because nothing this family has ever done that mattered. It did alone. And in the warm dark under the candle, the family of Harry Potter, both halves of it, all of it, began, very carefully, to prepare the ground on which a wizard raised by Master Splinter would bring ninja discipline and a mother's old magic and a father's deepest lesson together, and call the storm down on its own head, and find out at last which brother held steadier. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. The sensei's son, the cathedral, had been dying for 50 years, and on the night the war came to it, it woke for one last hour to hold the strangest congregation it had ever known. It stood on the city's edge where the old industry had failed, a great stone hull of a church with its roof half gone and the sky showing through the ribs, its windows long since fallen out so that the empty arches looked out on nothing but dark water and the far-off glitter of the towers. Pigeons lived in its galleries. Rain lived in its nave. And on this night, in the hours before Voldemort came, a family that owned the dark moved through it like blood through a body, placing themselves, and Harry stood at the center of the ruined nave and looked up through the broken roof at the open sky he had loved since he was 6, and breathed the candle breath, and waited for the worst thing in the world to walk through the door and find out it had come to the wrong place. They had built the trap with care, the way Splinter built everything. The leak had been perfect. A captured tracker's master is an easy creature to lie to, because his pride does the lying for you, and Voldemort had swallowed the location hole, the secret cathedral where the rat kept his old protective magic, the source, the answer to 18 years of a child who burned. He would come certain. He would come to take a thing he believed was kept here. And the cathedral, with its 300 shadows and its high galleries and its broken footing, was the worst ground a wizard ever fought on and the best ground a ninja ever owned, and every member of Harry's family, both halves of it, was already woven into its dark before the first Death Eater set foot on the cracked stone floor. Donatello had wired the ruin like an instrument. Hermione had layered it with wardings that would not stop a curse but would tangle an apparition, so that whoever came here would have to leave on foot, through the dark, through the family. Lupin and McGonagall held the high galleries with the Order at their backs. Sirius and the 4 turtles held the shadows of the nave, spread wide, silent, each of them a hand of the single body Splinter had spoken of. And Splinter himself, who could no longer fight as he once had and would not pretend otherwise, sat in the deepest shadow of all, by the ruined altar with a single unlit candle before him, because the old rat had one last thing to do in this war, and he had chosen the moment to do it. Harry stood alone in the open center, in the one pool of moonlight the broken roof let down, visible, offered, bait, the way his father had taught him that you let people see what they need to see. And the door of the cathedral, which had not opened in 50 years, opened. He came in a slow tide of black, 20 masked servants flowing in around him, and at the center of them the thing itself, tall and gray and noseless, robes the color of a starless night, red eyes finding the green-eyed figure waiting alone in the moonlight, and Lord Voldemort smiled the smile that had no warmth anywhere in it and spread his arms wide to the ruined nave as though he had come home. "Harry Potter," he said, and the high cold voice filled the broken church to its broken roof. "Alone, in the dark, waiting for me. After all these years, after the troll and the stone and the long, long game, you come to the end exactly as you began. Alone in the dark, with no one to die for you this time. No mother, no friends, just a frightened child in the empty house he was foolish enough to call a fortress." He drifted forward, and his servants spread out behind him through the nave, and not one of them saw the shadows in the galleries that were already counting them, already choosing them, already deciding the order. "Where is your rat, child? Where is the great protector who blunted my curse? I have come a very long way to thank him." "He's here," said Harry, and his voice did not rise, and it filled the church anyway, because his father had taught him that a still voice carries further than a loud one. "He's been here the whole time. So have I, so has everyone I love." He did not move from his pool of moonlight. He let his hands hang loose and open. "You came here because you've spent 18 years not understanding why a baby burned you, and you think the answer is a thing you can steal out of this church and own. It isn't a thing, Tom. It was never a thing. You've been hunting for an object because an object is the only kind of power you've ever been able to imagine, and that right there is the whole reason you're going to lose tonight. You came to rob a house. You don't even know what's in it." The red eyes narrowed at the name, the human name, the one no one used. "Then I will take it apart," said Voldemort softly, "stone by stone until I find it, beginning with you." And he raised his wand, and the war began. It began with the killing curse, because it always began with the killing curse. That was the whole of Voldemort's imagination, the straight green line, the one answer he had to every question the world had ever asked him. He flung it at the figure standing alone in the moonlight, certain, contemptuous, the same curse he had thrown at a baby in a crib 18 years before. Harry was not there when it arrived. He had stepped a single foot to the left, the move Lupin had marveled at on a practice floor a week before, the move a wizard's whole training could not account for, and the green light tore through the empty moonlight where he had stood and broke against the far wall, and in the half-second of Voldemort's pure astonishment that a thing he had killed could simply decline to be where the death was sent, the cathedral came alive in every shadow at once. The galleries spoke. McGonagall and Lupin and the Order reigned disciplined, fire down into the Death Eaters from the high dark, not to kill, but to scatter, to herd, to break the tide into pieces that could be taken one at a time. And out of the shadows of the nave came the family that owned the dark. Leonardo came first, because Leonardo always came first, a blue blur out of the black with his blades catching the moonlight, and he did not engage the Death Eaters in the lines they were trained to fight. He flowed between them, cutting wands from hands, turning their own crossfire into their own confusion, leading them step by step into the worst footing in the nave, where the broken stone would take an ankle that did not know the ground. Raphael hit them like the storm he had spent his whole life learning to hold inside its banks, driving the largest of them off their feet and into the dark where Sirius waited, the two guardians working as one, the wronged godfather, and the red-banded son passing enemies between them like a thing rehearsed for years. Donatello moved through it all unhurried, killing the lights wherever the wizards conjured them, dragging the whole battle down into the dark that belonged to his family, and his salvaged machines drank the spell light out of the air and spat back smoke and tangling nets and small impossible failures of everything the Death Eaters tried to do. And Michelangelo laughed. It was the strangest weapon on the field and the most terrible, in its way, because the Death Eaters had come braced for fear, had come to a dark ruined church to do fear, and instead there was an orange-banded shape flowing through their midst untouchable and grinning, calling cheerful insults, naming them as he disarmed them, turning the whole grim machinery of their terror into a thing that could not land, the way a famous bully's insult had once failed to land on a still green-eyed child in a dungeon corridor. A weapon you cannot make afraid is a weapon that breaks every plan built on fear, and Voldemort's every plan was built on fear, and so the laughter did more damage than any blade. What the Death Eaters could not understand, masked and drilled and certain as they were, was that they had not walked into a battle against a dozen separate enemies. They had walked into a single creature with many hands, exactly as Splinter had promised, and they could not find the seam in it, because there was no longer a seam to find. A wizard in the high gallery would mark a target and call it down, and a turtle in the nave would take it before the word had finished leaving his mouth, the eye and the hand of one body. Lupin and McGonagall stopped fighting like the Order had always fought, in proud, bright lines, and started fighting the way the turtles had taught them in a week of strange practice, low and dark and patient. Their wands shuddered until the instant of the strike so that the shadows no longer announced them. McGonagall transfigured a whole stretch of the broken floor into gripping sand under the Death Eater's feet and then into glass, and the turtles flowed across it as though it were nothing, because they had been crossing impossible footing their whole lives, and the wizards who tried to follow went down. Donatello and Hermione's machines drank the spell light wherever it bloomed, and spat smoke that swallowed the Dark Lord's straight green lines, entangling nets that no curse could cut because they were not, technically, there. A Death Eater would throw a killing curse into the dark at a green shape, and the green shape would not be there, and the curse would carry on into another Death Eater who very much was, and the masked servants of Lord Voldemort began, for the first time in their lives, to be more afraid of their own crossfire than of the things moving in the shadows. And Sirius Black fought beside Raphael through the whole of it, the wronged godfather and the red-banded son, and they did not need to speak, because they had spent a summer of evenings learning each other's silences on a practice floor under the city. Sirius would drive an enemy back with a blaze of light, and Raph would take him out of the dark on the other side. Raph would break a line and Sirius would seal it. The two hard guardians of Harry Potter, each made hard by a wrong the world had done him, poured all of that old hardness out at last into the one fight it had been saving itself for, and there was something in both of them that came loose and clean in the doing of it, a debt of years finally given somewhere to stand. In the center of it all, Harry moved through Voldemort's curses like water through a slope, and he did not strike back, and that was the thing that began, slowly, to unmake the Dark Lord's certainty. Harry stepped and turned and was not there and was not there and was not there, and every curse Voldemort sent tore through the place a balanced creature had just left, and the figure in the moonlight never once flung a curse of his own, never once gave Voldemort the duel he had come for, the straight-line contest of force against force that Voldemort would have won. Harry gave him nothing to push against. He gave him only a still pond, endlessly receiving the storm and never once spilling, and Voldemort, who had beaten every enemy he had ever faced by overpowering them, found that there was nothing here to overpower, and for the first time in his long, cold life began, somewhere underneath the rage, to feel the thin, sour beginning of doubt. So he did the thing that Splinter had promised he would do, because it was the only thing he had left, the thing he had always done. He stopped trying to kill Harry, and he turned to make Harry watch. Enough, he hissed, and his wand swung off the dancing, impossible boy, and onto the gallery where an old witch in tartan was holding the high ground, and the green light leapt up through the dark toward Minerva McGonagall's back. And Harry's balance held, because Donatello was already there. A wired net spat from the dark, swallowing the curse a foot from her spine. So Voldemort swung again, onto Sirius this time, onto the Godfather, and the light flew, and Harry's balance held, because Raphael took his guardian brother off his feet and out of the line a half-second ahead of the Death, and the two of them rolled up out of the dark already moving. And Voldemort, shrieking now, swung his killing curse around the church like a scythe, onto Lupin, onto Ron in the high gallery, onto Hermione at her wardings, onto each of the people Harry loved in turn, faster and faster, trying to find the one death that would crack the still pond at last, trying to make the figure in the moonlight feel the fear that was the only language Voldemort had ever learned to speak. And the family did not break, and Harry's balance did not break, because every curse that came found someone who loved its target standing in the way, and that was the whole of the trap, that was the thing Voldemort could not understand even as it closed around him. He was throwing death at a single body with 12 hearts, and there was no part of it he could reach that the rest of it did not already cover. So at last, because he was what he was, and because the shallow can only ever reach for the cruelest thing in the room, Voldemort turned his wand on the oldest and frailest target of all, the one shape in the cathedral that had not moved the whole battle, the gray rat sitting calm by the ruined altar with an unlit candle before him. The protector, Voldemort breathed, savoring it. Let us see how steady the child holds when I take the rat in front of him, the way I once took the mother. And he flung the killing curse at Splinter. Time did the thing it does for Harry in the worst moment of his life. The green light crossed the dark church slow as a falling leaf. He was too far. He had been kept too far on purpose by his own plan, the bait in the center while his father sat safe in the shadows. And now the shadows were not safe, and the worst thing in the world was a slow green leaf falling toward the gray head that had borne his hand 10,000 times. And there was no curse Harry could throw, and no distance he could close, and nothing, nothing at all, that the 18 years of careful preparation had left him with which to stop it. Except the thing his father had told him from a sickbed, let the fear come all the way in, and stand in the love that is deeper than it. Harry let the fear come. The whole black flood of it, the worst there has ever been, came in all at once, and it met the pond his father had spent a lifetime making bottomless, and the pond received it and did not spill, and in the held depth of that unspilled moment Harry Potter did not reach for his father with panic, as he had reached for a bolt across a workbench and gone gray. He reached the other way. He reached down into the deepest, calmest, fullest place in himself, the place built one dawn at a time over 18 years, and he wanted calm on a still pond on the worst day of his life, for the killing light not to reach the one he loved. And the air went solid, not in a fist this time, in a wall. Every inch of air between the green light and the gray head turned to standing stone in the space of a heartbeat. The whole of Harry's bottomless calm poured into one impossible held thing, and the killing curse struck it and stopped, hung, shuddering, an arm's length from Splinter's face and did not go through, because there was not enough death in all of Voldemort's wand to push through that much love held perfectly still. The cathedral went silent. Splinter opened his eyes. He looked at the green light hanging frozen an arm's length from his face, and then he looked across the whole length of the ruined nave at his youngest son standing in the moonlight with his hand outstretched, and the worst day of his life held bottomless and unspilled in his steady green eyes, and the old rat, who had carried a baby out of a flood 18 years before, smiled. "There he is," said Splinter into the silence, so quietly that only the dark heard him. And he reached out one weathered hand, and he closed it gently around the unlit candle before him, and the candle, which had no business holding a flame, lit. It was the signal. They had agreed on it days before, in the warm dark under the lair, the whole strange family of two worlds. When the candle lights, we end it, all of us together, because nothing this family has ever done that mattered. It did alone. The cathedral fell on Lord Voldemort like a single closing hand. The Order's fire came down from the galleries all at once, not scattering now but converging, stripping the last of his servants away from him, sealing the Dark Lord alone in the center of the nave, with no tide of black left to hide in. The turtles came out of the shadows from 4 directions, and they did not touch him, because Splinter's house did not raise creatures who struck a beaten thing, but they took the floor around him, every angle, every exit, the single body closing its many hands. Hermione's wardings flared and held. There was no apparition, no flight, no straight line left anywhere for him to run down. And Harry walked out of his pool of moonlight at last, for the first time in the whole battle, and crossed the dark church toward the thing that had murdered his parents, and the green killing curse still hung frozen in the air behind him, held by a calm that had not wavered, an arm's length from his father's face, a monument to everything Voldemort had never learned. "You did a thing to yourself a long time ago," Harry said, crossing the dark floor toward him without hurry, his hands still loose, still open. Hermione worked it out. It took her months. "You were so afraid of dying that you tore your own soul into pieces and hid them in the world, so that no one could kill all of you at once. You thought that was strength. You thought you were making yourself unkillable. What you were really doing was making yourself shallow, on purpose, again and again, a little less of you in every piece until there was almost nothing left that was whole." He stopped, a few paces away in the moonlight from the broken roof. "We found them, Tom. All the months you were rebuilding your strength, we were quietly taking apart the pieces of you that you'd scattered, one by one, my family and Dumbledore's people together, because Hermione is cleverer than you and my brothers can get into anywhere, and there is nowhere in this world a creature raised in the dark cannot reach. There's only one piece left now. You don't even know where it is." His green eyes did not waver. "It's been behind my eye my whole life. The night you killed my mother, a piece of you broke off and buried itself in me, and you never knew, and it has been sitting in the deepest, most loved place in the entire world for 18 years, drowning, and tonight I am going to let it drown all the way. You made yourself shallow to escape death. I was made deep by people who love me. We are about to find out which one death listens to. You wanted a duel," Harry said, "all these years. You wanted me to point my power at you so you could point yours back and find out whose was bigger, because that's the only contest you've ever been able to imagine, and you'd have won it, because you have more power than me, you always have. So I'm not going to give it to you. I'm never going to give it to you. I'm going to do the thing you cannot survive, which is the thing you have run from your whole life. I'm going to let you throw everything you have at me, and I'm going to stand here and not be afraid, because I am loved, Tom. I have been loved every single day of my life by more people than you have ever let near you, and there is no curse in your wand deep enough to reach the bottom of that. Throw it. Throw all of it. Find out." And Voldemort, because he was what he was, because the shallow can do nothing in the end but pour out everything they have and discover it was never enough, loosed a scream to the broken roof, and threw the killing curse one last time, with all the power of the most terrible wizard in 100 years behind it, point-blank, at the one who would not run. It struck Harry full in the chest, and it found, where it expected, a child, an ocean. 18 years of being held. A mother who died with her arms out. A father who stepped in front of a curse. 4 brothers who had divided his raising among them without being asked. A falling taught and a cotta given, and a workshop opened, and a joy kept alive. A godfather who had thanked a rat on the floor of a sewer. 2 worlds that had come down a ladder into one warm room and become a single body with a dozen hearts. The killing curse poured into all of it looking for a bottom to break, and there was no bottom. There was only depth and more love layered on love 18 years thick, and the curse spent itself searching for an end to it and found none. And at the last, with nowhere left to go and nothing left to break, it turned, the way water turns when it cannot go down, and it went back the way it had come. And the fragment of Voldemort's own torn and shallow soul, the splinter of himself he had buried in a baby's scar 18 years before and never understood, burned away to nothing in the flood of everything Harry was, like a single dry leaf in a rising tide, and Harry felt it go, an old ache lifting from behind his eye that he had carried so long he had forgotten it was not part of him, and stood whole, at last entirely himself, in the center of a love no darkness could find the floor of. The rebounding curse took Lord Voldemort in the chest, his own death, his own straight green line, returned to its sender by the one thing he had spent his whole life refusing to learn. There was no body left to claw back to this time, because he had spent the last of himself making the throw, poured the whole shallow remainder of his fractured soul into one final attempt to reach a depth that had no bottom, and a thing that has made itself shallow in 100 pieces has nothing left to hold it in the world when the last piece fails. He came apart the way smoke comes apart. He had spent his life cheating death by making himself less, and at the end there was so little of him left that death simply, finally, gently, took the rest, and the high cold voice that had filled the broken church rose once into a thin fading shriek and was gone, out through the open roof, up into the indifferent sky, and did not come back, and would never come back, because there was, at long last, nothing left of him to return. The killing curse he had thrown at Splinter, with the will that held it gone slack at last, fell out of the air and struck the altar stone and spent itself harmlessly against the rock, an arm's length from an old rat who had not, in the end, needed to move at all, because his son had stood between him and the death the way his son had been taught to stand, by a mother and a father both. The cathedral was silent, and then it was not, because somewhere up in the high gallery Michelangelo started to cheer, and could not stop, and one by one the whole strange family of 2 worlds took it up, and the sound of it rose through the broken roof and out into the dawn that had begun, while no one was watching to come. There was a cost, because there is always a cost, and the family did not pretend otherwise, because they did not lie to each other in that house. Leonardo's arm would carry the tracker's scar for the rest of his life. Lupin had taken a curse across the ribs that Hermione's hands and a great deal of luck pulled him back from over 3 long days. There were order witches and wizards who would not see another dawn, and the family mourned them properly, all of them, in the days that followed, the way they had mourned Cedric, because a sacrifice honored is the only thing that makes a sacrifice bearable. And Splinter, who had spent the last of his strength holding a single flame to a candle at the right moment, did not rise from his cushions for a long while after, and there was a season, that summer, when his sons learned to make their voices light around a fear they would not name, the way you do when you have started to count. But he did rise. That was the thing. The old rat was not finished, not yet, and on a morning some weeks after the cathedral, Harry woke in the grey pre-dawn of the lair to the sound he had woken to his whole life, the soft sound of his father moving through the dawn cotta, slower than before, shorter than before, but there, alive, unhurried, the stillest thing in the world, and Harry rose and went and stood beside him, the eldest Discipline and the youngest, and the 2 of them ran the forms together in the grey light while the lair slept. And neither of them said anything, because some things do not need saying, and Splinter had taught him that years ago, when Harry was small enough to fit under one weathered hand. The wizarding world wanted him after. Of course it did. They had a name for him again, the one who had finished what he started in a crib, and they wanted to give him things, titles and gold and a seat at their tables, and they wanted to know, all of them, where he had been all those years, who had raised the child who could not be made afraid, what the secret was. Harry went up and stood before them once in their gilded hall and gave them an answer, and it was not the answer they expected. "You want to know my secret," he told them. "You want to know where the power came from, the thing that let a baby survive and a boy stand still in front of the worst wizard in the world. So I'll tell you, and then I'm going home, and you're not going to follow me, because the second condition was the one I never broke. He looked out over the hall full of the most powerful witches and wizards alive. I was raised in the dark by someone who loved me. That's it. That's the whole secret. There's no spell for it. There's no object you can keep in a vault. A wise old creature you've never heard of pulled me out of a flood when nobody else in the world wanted me, and he raised me alongside 4 sons who became my brothers, and not one of them ever once made me feel like I was alone, and that is the only reason I am standing here. You spent 18 years looking for a weapon that could beat the Dark Lord. There was never a weapon. There was a family. That's all there ever is in the end. You'd be amazed how few people figure that out before it's too late to go home. And he stepped down off their stage and went down through the dark to the only home he had ever wanted, and they let him go, because they had seen his eyes and understood at last that there was nothing in their gilded hall he needed. He did the other things a person has to do before he went home, and he did them in the right order, because his father had taught him that you honor the dead by giving the grief somewhere to stand. He went to a quiet churchyard in a village he had never lived in and stood a long while in front of 2 stones with his own name carved on them, James and Lily Potter, and he told them, out loud in the cold, the thing he had wanted to tell them since a woman in Tartan had said his mother had died with her arms out. I was worth it, he said. I know that's not how it works. I know you didn't do it because I'd earn it. You did it because I was yours. But I wanted you to know anyway. I was raised right. I was loved every single day. The thing you died to stop is gone, and I'm the one who stopped it, and I did it the way you started it, by being loved more than he could understand. You'd have liked them, the people who raised me. You'd have liked them a lot. I wish you could have met. I wish that more than anything. He laid down a single white flower on each stone, and then a third a little apart, for a boy named Cedric who had died in a graveyard for the crime of standing next to him, and he stood with all 3 of them a while in the cold, and then he went to say his other goodbyes. Ron and Hermione walked him as far as the hidden door that would take him back across the ocean. There was no good way to say what the 3 of them were to each other, and so they did not try. They had faced a troll and a chessboard and a dark lord together, and there are bonds that do not need their names spoken aloud. You'll call, Hermione said, not quite a question, her arms folded against the thing she would not say. The mirror, you'll call all the time, you won't just vanish back down there and turn into a story again. Every week, Harry said. Twice, you're my family too. That doesn't stop because the war did. None of you stop. He held Ron once, hard, and Hermione longer, and then he stepped through the door and left the gilded world behind him without one backward look, because everything in it that he loved had promised to call, and everything in it that he needed was already waiting at the bottom of a ladder under a different city. He came down the ladder into the candlelight, and the lair was warm. It was always warm. Splinter had made it warm by hand over a lifetime, the slow theft of heat from the city's veins, and the warmth of it closed around Harry the way it had closed around a soaked basket 18 years before. The candles stood in their niches. Brazier held its low red bed of coals, and his family was there, all of it that the lair could hold, the 4 green shapes and the gray-whiskered one, and a kettle was on, and the smell of the place was wax and tea and the particular green clean smell of home. He returns, Michelangelo announced from the kitchen where he was performing the rite. Keeper of the names, just in time. We've got a situation. We've got a victory pizza, and it does not have a name yet, and the pressure is frankly immense. He still had all of it on him. He always would. He set the things down on the low table now, one by one, the way you lay out the pieces of a life that has come all the way around. A smooth gray river stone, worn round, that he had carried in his pocket through a castle and a graveyard and a cathedral and never once lost. A strip of faded red cloth tied under his collar that he had put his hand to every time someone out there had tried to tell him who he was. A flat brass mirror, one half of a thing built by a brother who could not do magic and had loved him into reach of it anyway. And last, unrolled across the table, soft at the creases from 1,000 readings. A long scroll of butcher paper covered in a round, careful hand, every pizza the family had ever named, from the midnight avalanche all the way down to the whole family, with a fresh gap at the bottom waiting for the newest one. His brothers gathered around the small museum of themselves, and none of them said anything for a moment, because all 4 of them recognized what they were looking at. You kept the cloth, said Raphael Ruff, looking at the faded red strip. 8 years, through all of it. You kept a scrap of my old band. You said to put my hand on it and remember who I actually was, said Harry. I did, about 1,000 times. It worked every time, Raph. You weren't there, but you were there. That was the whole trick of it. You figured that out years before I did. Leonardo picked up the river stone and turned it in the candlelight and set it back down with the care of a man returning a relic to its shrine. Be the stone, he said quietly. When the river's loud. It got very loud, said Harry. I was the stone. And Leo, who said everything by saying nothing, put a hand on his youngest brother's shoulder and left it there, which was a speech from Leo. Donatello had the mirror, turning it over, checking the brass as he checked everything, and his clever hands were not quite steady. It held the whole time, he said. 1,000 miles, an ocean, a war. I built it in a workshop with the door shut, betting that somebody out there knew a charm I couldn't do, and you learned the charm first, before the dueling, before any of it, you learned the one that calls home. He looked up. You never missed a week, not once, not even the bad weeks, especially not the bad weeks. You made me promise, said Harry. Learn the one that lets you call home before anything else. It was the best advice anybody gave me in 2 worlds. I just did what my brother told me. And Michelangelo did not say anything at all, which never happened, because Michelangelo was looking at the scroll, at the long list of names in his own hand, kept whole and carried through a war, and his round face was doing every single thing it felt and hiding none of it, and Harry crossed to him and put an arm around him and said into the quiet, I kept the names, Mikey. All of them, the whole time, through everything. You gave me the most important job in the family and I never once put it down. He picked up the pen. And we've got a new one to add. Hand me the list. The keeper's still on the clock. Show me, said Harry, and went and stood over it with the gravity the occasion demanded, as he had stood over 100 pizzas since before he could talk. It was a good one. Mikey had outdone himself. Harry looked at it a long moment, and his brothers gathered, and Sirius, who lived part of the year in the lair now, and had taken to the ritual with the devotion of the converted, lined in, and even Splinter rose from his cushions and came slow to the table to render judgment, because no name was law until the whole family had voted. The river that bends, said Harry at last, because that's us. The river bends and it does not break, and the winter that breaks the river that won't bend goes right past the one that will. Sensei taught me that before I could talk. It's the first thing I ever learned, and it turned out to be the only thing I needed. He looked up at his father. The river that bends, all in favor. Every hand at the table went up. Splinter put his weathered hand on the crown of his youngest son's dark head, where it had rested 10,000 times, since the first hour of the first night, and let it stay. And Harry leaned up into the weight of it as he had leaned up into it when he was 3 days old and could not hold his own head, and the whole of his life was in that line. The flood and the candle and the rooftops and the castle and the cathedral, and the dawn katas and the kept names and the 2 worlds and the one family, all of it. Held in the warm dark under a city that had no idea what it kept. Eat, said Splinter, and his old voice was full and it did not spill. All of you. We have lost much and we have kept more, and tomorrow we will rise in the gray light and run the forms together, slower than before, all of us, because that is what a family does. It bends, it does not break, it keeps the joy and it keeps the names and it keeps each other and it goes on. His hand pressed once on Harry's head, warm, certain, the oldest blessing he had. Welcome home, my son. The candle is lit. It was always lit. It was lit the whole time you were gone, and it will be lit every night you are here, for as long as I am given to light it, and after, because I have taught 5 sons to keep a flame, and a flame kept by people who love each other does not go out. And in the warm dark under the sleeping city, the family of Splinter ate together, and laughed, and named the pizza, and the candle on the low table burned steady and unwavering, the way a still pond holds an ocean without breaking its own surface, the way a wizard had learned to hold the whole flood of the world and never once spill, the way it had burned the first night and would burn the last, and Harry Potter, who had been thrown away by one world and pulled out of the flood by another, sat among everyone he loved in one room safe together, the thing the mirror had shown him, the thing he had been worth all along, and was home. Chapter 7 End.